The cold came down like a fist. Clara couldn't feel her fingers anymore. She'd stopped trying to curl them an hour ago, maybe two. Time moved differently when you were tied to a chair in the center of town with 100 pairs of eyes drilling into your skull. The rope bit into her wrists, rough hemp that someone's wife probably braided last summer while humming something cheerful. Funny how the things meant to hold laundry could just as easily hold a person. Blackridge Hollow wasn't much to look at. A scatter of wooden buildings pressed against the base of the mountains like they were trying to hide from something bigger. The main street, if you could call it that, was just hard-packed dirt that turned to soup when it rained and froze solid when it didn't. 30, maybe 40 families, all mining families, all people who'd crawled up here looking for silver and found mostly disappointment. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, and privacy was something that happened to other people in other towns. Clara had grown up here. Not that it mattered now. Thief! The word came from her left. She didn't look, didn't need to. That was Martha Henning, whose husband owned the general store and whose voice could strip paint off a barn door. Clara had heard that voice plenty growing up, usually when she'd lingered too long near the candy jars, back when her mother was still alive and they could afford things like sugar and shame in equal measure. Stealing from livestock. This one came from her right. Deeper voice. That'd be Samuel Cross, who ran the stables and probably figured she'd personally insulted his horses by taking their feed. Lower than a dog. More voices now, building like a storm. The crowd had been gathering since dawn, pulled from their homes by the bell that usually meant fire or death. But today meant something they liked even better, entertainment with a moral center. They stood in a loose circle around her, maybe 20 feet back, close enough to throw things, but far enough to pretend they weren't part of it if someone came asking later. Not that anyone would ask. "My daughter saw you!" A woman's voice, shrill. "Sneaking around the feed shed like a rat!" Clara kept her eyes on the ground. Mud and ice and a few brave weeds trying to survive between the stones. If she looked up, she'd see their faces. If she saw their faces, she'd see people she'd known her whole life. Mrs. Patterson, who used to give her mother herbs when the coughing got bad. Old Jim Preston, who'd taught her to skip stones on the creek before it dried up 3 summers back. The Talbot boys, who'd played with her brother before he died. They weren't those people now. Now they were just the mob. "Silence means guilt," someone shouted. Clara's jaw tightened. She wanted to scream at them that silence meant she was trying not to cry, that it meant she'd learned long ago that nothing she said would matter anyway, that when you're 22 years old and your parents are dead and your brother drowned in the mine shaft and you haven't eaten in 3 days, you don't steal because you're evil. You steal because your stomach stops caring about morality around day 2. But she didn't say any of that. She just kept breathing, in and out, frost in her lungs. "String her up. Make an example." Sheriff Drummond stepped forward then, and the crowd settled some. He was a big man, 50-something, with a face like weathered leather and hands that had probably done worse things than what they were about to do to her. He wore his badge pinned crooked on a coat that had seen better decades, and he moved with the casual authority of someone who'd never been questioned and didn't plan to start now. Clara Voss, his voice carried across the circle, flat and final. "You've been accused of theft, multiple witnesses. The evidence is clear." "I was hungry," Clara said. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "Don't care." Drummond cut her off with a wave. "Hungry ain't an excuse. We're all hungry. Difference is, the rest of us don't steal." "I didn't know it was shut your mouth." He said it conversationally, like he was commenting on the weather. "This ain't a trial. We don't do trials for people like you. This is a lesson." People like you. Clara knew what that meant. She'd been people like you since her father died, owing money to half the town, and her mother followed him 6 months later. She'd been people like you since she'd refused to marry the mine foreman's son and take the easy way out. She'd been people like you since she'd chosen to starve alone, rather than sell herself piecemeal to men who'd known her since she was a kid. Drummond pulled something from his coat, a leather strap, doubled over. The crowd murmured its approval. 10 strikes, he announced. Then she leaves. Don't care where she goes, long as it ain't here. 10. Clara's stomach dropped. She'd seen this before. Last year they'd done it to a man who'd cheated at cards. He'd left town walking like his spine was made of broken glass. and someone said he died 2 days later in the woods. But he'd been a man, and he'd actually stolen money, and this was just feed. This was just scraps. The first blow caught her across the shoulders. Pain exploded white and sharp, stealing her breath. The rope held her in place, kept her from falling, and suddenly she understood why they'd tied her sitting down. So she couldn't collapse, couldn't escape it, couldn't do anything but take what they gave her. "One," Drummond said. The crowd cheered. "You deserve this," someone called out. "Reap what you sow." The second blow landed lower, across her spine. Clara bit down on a scream, tasted copper. She wouldn't give them that. Wouldn't give them the satisfaction of hearing her break. 2. More cheering. Someone was laughing. Clara recognized that laugh. It was Eddie Marsh, who'd kissed her once behind the church when they were 14 and then told everyone she'd begged for it. He was laughing now like this was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. The third strike hit her ribs. Something shifted inside, not quite breaking but promising to. Her vision grayed at the edges. 3. Through the ringing in her ears, Clara heard a child ask his mother what the woman had done. The mother's response was too quiet to catch, but the tone was clear. She earned it. 4, 5, 6. Numbers lost meaning. Everything was just pain now, stacking up in layers, each blow adding to the weight until Clara felt like she might sink straight through the chair into the frozen ground. Her teeth chattered. Her breath came in shallow sips. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice wondered if 10 strikes was really enough to kill someone, or if they'd picked that number because it sounded merciful while still being enough to do the job slow. 7. "Make it 15, someone shouted. 20. Drummond paused. Clara could feel him considering it, weighing the crowd's bloodlust against whatever passed for restraint in a man who beat tied-up women for entertainment. The silence stretched. Then a new voice cut through the cold air, quiet, but it carried. "That's enough." The crowd shifted. Clara couldn't see who'd spoken. Her vision was tunneling down to a pinpoint, everything going fuzzy except the mud directly in front of her. But she heard the change in the air. Surprise, then anger. "This ain't your business, Crow." That was Drummond, and his voice had an edge now. "Go back to your mountain. Step away from her." "The hell I will. She's a thief. We're handling it." "You're beating a starving woman who took pig feed. You're handling your own entertainment." A pause, then, "You calling me a liar?" "I'm calling you a man who tied up someone half his size and invited the whole town to watch him swing a strap. You can call that whatever you want." Clara tried to focus. Through the blur of pain and cold, she caught a shape moving through the crowd. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the kind of careful deliberation that suggested he knew exactly how many people were around him and what they were capable of. The crowd parted for him. Not because they wanted to. Clara could feel the resistance in the air like static before a storm, but because something about the way he moved suggested that not parting would be a mistake they'd regret. Elias Crow stepped into the circle. Clara had seen him before. Everyone in Blackridge knew Crow, even if they didn't know him. He was the man who lived up in the high country, the tracker who came down twice a year to trade pelts and buy supplies, and then vanished again before anyone could corner him into conversation. He had maybe 5 years on Clara, maybe 10. Hard to tell with mountain people, who aged different, dark hair pulled back, face carved by wind and sun into something that looked almost cruel, until you saw his eyes, which were just tired. He looked at Clara now, really looked, like he was seeing past the mud and blood and trying to figure out what was left underneath. Then he turned to Drummond. "Cut her loose." Drummond's face went red. "You've got some brass coming down here and—" "Cut her loose or I'll do it." "This is legal. She broke the law." "What law? Show me the paper. Show me where it says you can beat a woman for stealing scraps." "Don't need paper." Drummond's hand drifted toward his belt where a pistol sat in a worn holster. "I'm the law here. What I say goes." "Then your law is garbage." The crowd sucked in a collective breath. You didn't talk to Drummond like that. Not in Blackridge, not anywhere really, but especially not here where he was sheriff and mayor and judge all rolled into one sweaty package. Drummond's face went from red to purple. "You're making a mistake, Crow." "Probably. Won't be my first. This woman is a criminal. I'm doing what needs done." "You're putting on a show because winter's been long and people are bored." Elias took a step closer. "And maybe because it feels good to hurt someone who can't fight back." I get it. Power's addictive. But you've had your 7 strikes. That's enough. It was supposed to be 10. Yeah, well, plans change. They stood there, 5 feet apart. 2 men who clearly had history that Clara didn't understand and didn't have the strength to care about. She just wanted it to stop. Wanted the pain to stop. Wanted the voices to stop. Wanted to curl up somewhere dark and quiet and maybe not wake up. Drummond's hand tightened on his pistol. You pull that knife on your belt, and I'll shoot you where you stand. Then shoot me, but I'm cutting her loose either way. The silence stretched so thin Clara thought it might snap. Somewhere in the crowd, a baby cried. Someone shushed it. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of wood smoke and unwashed bodies and fear. Then Drummond stepped back. Just 1 step, but it was enough. Clara saw something flicker across his face. Not quite fear, but close enough. He'd blinked first, and everyone had seen it. Fine. Drummond spat the word like poison. Take her. But she's not welcome here. She sets foot in Blackridge again. I'll finish what I started. And you, Crow, you're not welcome either. Not anymore. You made your choice. Elias didn't respond. He just moved past Drummond like the man was furniture, pulled a knife from his belt, and cut the ropes holding Clara to the chair. She collapsed forward. Would have hit the ground face first if Elias hadn't caught her, one arm under her shoulders, holding her weight like it was nothing. Clara tried to stand, failed, tried again. Her legs had gone numb from sitting too long in the cold, and her back was on fire, and everything hurt so bad she wanted to vomit. Easy, Elias said. His voice was closer now, quiet enough that only she could hear. Don't try to walk yet. I can. You can't. Just breathe. Clara did. In through her nose, out through her mouth. The air tasted like iron and ice. Slowly, sensation returned to her feet. Pins and needles at first, then something worse. Actual feeling, which meant actual pain. Elias kept his arm around her. With his free hand, he pulled off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. It was warm from his body heat and smelled like pine and leather and wood smoke. Clara wanted to crawl inside it and disappear. Can you stand? He asked. I think so. He helped her up. Clara's knees buckled once, but Elias held steady, patient, waiting until she found her balance. The crowd watched in silence. Clara could feel their hatred pressing in from all sides, thick enough to choke on. Drummond pointed at them both. You're done here. Both of you. You understand me? Elias didn't answer. He just turned Clara toward the edge of town, keeping himself between her and the crowd, and started walking. It was the longest walk of Clara's life. Every step sent pain shooting up her spine. Her vision kept trying to gray out, and twice she stumbled and would have fallen if Elias hadn't been there. The crowd followed him for a while, keeping pace maybe 20 feet back, still shouting insults, still throwing stones. One caught Clara on the shoulder, another hit her leg. She flinched but kept walking. Don't stop, Elias murmured. Don't give them the satisfaction. They're going to kill us. No, they're going to watch us leave. That's all they want. He was right. By the time they reached the edge of town, marked by a hand-painted sign that said Blackridge Hollow in letters that were peeling and faded, the crowd had started to thin. A few diehards kept following, but their hearts weren't in it anymore. The show was over. Time to go home and feel righteous over dinner. Clara didn't realize she was crying until they were past the sign and into the tree line. Then it hit her all at once. The fear, the pain, the humiliation, the sheer crushing weight of being hated by everyone she'd ever known. Her legs gave out. Elias caught her again. This time he didn't try to help her stand. He just lowered them both down until Clara was sitting in the snow, her back against a tree, his coat still around her shoulders. I'm sorry, Clara choked out. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Stop. You shouldn't have. Stop. His voice was firm but not unkind. You didn't ask me to step in. I chose that. Don't apologize for my choices. Clara pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to force the tears back. It didn't work. They just kept coming, hot against her frozen skin. Elias sat down beside her in the snow. Didn't touch her, didn't crowd her, just sat there like he had all the time in the world. Behind them, Blackridge Hollow was a smudge of gray smoke against white mountains. Ahead, the forest stretched up into the high country, dark pines and deeper shadows, and the kind of cold that killed you slow if you weren't careful. Where will you go? Clara asked when she could speak again. Home. I've got a cabin up in the high valley, about 6 miles northeast. I can't walk 6 miles. I know. We'll go slow, and we'll stop when you need to. Clara turned to look at him. Really look. His face was weathered, but not old. Beard trimmed close, eyes the color of pine bark. There were scars, one across his left eyebrow, another along his jaw. The kind you got from living hard, not from being careless. Why did you help me? She asked. Elias was quiet for a long moment. Then, because someone should have. It wasn't a good answer. It didn't explain anything. But Clara was too tired to push, and maybe it didn't matter anyway. He'd helped her. That was more than anyone else had done in a very long time. I don't have anything, Clara said. I can't pay you back. Can't give you anything. Didn't ask you to. Then what do you want? Elias stood up, brushed snow off his pants, and offered her his hand. Right now? I want to get us both out of this cold before we freeze to death. Everything else can wait. Clara stared at his hand. Calloused, scarred, steady. She thought about Drummond's hand, how it had felt swinging that strap. She thought about all the other hands in Blackridge. Hands that had thrown stones. Hands that had pointed and jeered. Hands that belonged to people who'd watched her suffer and called it justice. This hand was different. She didn't know why. Didn't know if she could trust it. But sitting in the snow with her back on fire and her future a blank wall, Clara realized she didn't have a lot of options. She took his hand. Elias pulled her to her feet. This time, her legs held. Barely, but they held. 6 miles, Clara said, give or take. I might not make it. Then I'll carry you. He said it like it was simple. Like carrying a grown woman 6 miles through mountain snow was just something you did. Clara almost laughed. Almost. But laughing hurt, so she just nodded and started walking. They moved northeast, away from Blackridge and deeper into the wilderness. The forest closed around them, dense pine and bare aspen, their white bark like bone against the snow. The ground rose steadily, each step a little harder than the last. Clara's back screamed with every movement. She bit down on the pain, swallowed it, kept walking. Elias stayed close but gave her space. He didn't try to help unless she stumbled. Didn't talk unless she did. Just walked beside her, his presence solid and real in a world that had spent the morning reminding her she was neither. After maybe a mile, Clara had to stop. Her vision was graying again, and her breath was coming in shallow gasps. Elias stopped immediately. No complaints, no impatience. He just pulled a canteen from his pack and handed it to her. The water was cold enough to hurt her teeth. Clara drank it anyway, felt it slide down her throat like ice. When she handed the canteen back, her hands were shaking. Thank you, she managed. Elias just nodded and put the canteen away. They kept walking. The sun moved across the sky, not warming anything, just marking time. Clara lost track of how long they'd been moving. Could have been 2 hours, could have been 4. Everything blurred together, the pain, the cold, the endless white of snow, and the dark verticals of trees. Once she thought she heard voices behind them, and her heart seized, but when she looked back, there was nothing. Just forest. Just silence. Do you think they'll follow? She asked. No. How do you know? Because they got what they wanted. They hurt you. They ran you out. Following us into the mountains means work, and people like that don't do work when the fun's already over. Clara wanted to believe him. She tried to, but fear had roots and they went deep. They walked on. By the time the sun started to drop, Clara was running on fumes. Her legs had gone from numb to aching to something beyond aching, a deep, bone-tired exhaustion that made each step feel like lifting stone. Her back had stopped screaming and started whimpering, which somehow felt worse. And the cold was getting inside her now, settling into her joints, making her teeth chatter. Elias noticed. Of course he noticed. Almost there, he said. You said that an hour ago. Did I? Yes. Well, it's more true now. Clara would have laughed if she had the energy. Instead, she just focused on putting one foot in front of the other. Left, right, left, right. The world narrowed down to that simple rhythm. Nothing else mattered. Nothing else existed. Then Elias stopped. Clara almost walked into him. She caught herself, swaying, and looked up. They were standing at the edge of a small clearing. In the center of the clearing sat a cabin. Rough built but solid, logs chinked with mud and moss, a stone chimney rising from one end. Smoke curled from the chimney, gray against the darkening sky. Around the cabin, snow lay thick and undisturbed except for a single set of tracks leading to the door. Behind it, the mountains rose like teeth. "Home," Elias said. Clara stared. She'd expected something barely livable. A lean-to, maybe, or a cave with a tarp over the entrance. This was an actual structure. Small, sure, maybe 20 feet by 30, but it had walls and a roof, and that chimney meant warmth, and warmth meant... Her knees buckled. This time Elias didn't just catch her. He scooped her up, one arm under her knees and the other around her shoulders, and carried her across the clearing like she weighed nothing. Clara wanted to protest, wanted to tell him she could walk the last 50 feet, but her body had other ideas. Her body wanted to shut down. She let it. The cabin door opened under Elias's boot. Inside was dark and warm, blessedly, impossibly warm. Clara caught glimpses as he carried her in, a stone fireplace with embers glowing red, a table, a chair, shelves lined with supplies, furs hanging on the walls, a bed in the corner piled with blankets. Elias carried her to the bed and set her down carefully. The mattress gave under her weight, soft in a way Clara had almost forgotten things could be soft. She wanted to sink into it and never surface. "Stay awake," Elias said. He was moving around the cabin now, building up the fire, lighting a lantern. "I need to look at your back." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You took 7 blows from a leather strap. I need to make sure nothing's torn." "It's just bruises." "Maybe, but I'm looking anyway." He came back with a bowl of water and some clean rags, set them on the small table beside the bed. Then he paused. "I'm going to need you to sit up and take off your shirt, or what's left of it." Clara looked down. Her shirt, a threadbare thing that had been 2 sizes too big even before this morning, was torn across the back, stained with blood and mud. She hadn't realized, hadn't noticed. She'd been too busy trying not to die. Slowly, carefully, she sat up. Pain lanced through her spine. She gritted her teeth and reached for the shirt's hem, but her hands were shaking too hard to grip it. Elias helped. His hands were steady and impersonal, like he was handling an injured animal, not a woman. He lifted the shirt over her head, and Clara felt the cold air hit her skin. She shivered. "Christ," Elias muttered. "That bad?" "You've got 7 welts across your back. 3 of them broke the skin. It's going to bruise something ugly, but you'll live." He dipped a rag in the water and started cleaning the wounds. His touch was gentle, but firm, and Clara had to bite down on a whimper when he pressed on one of the deeper cuts. She focused on breathing, in through her nose, out through her mouth. "Why'd you help me?" she asked again. "Really?" Elias didn't answer right away. He kept working, cleaning each wound with careful attention. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "I grew up in a town like Blackridge. Different name, same people. When I was 16, they did something like what they did to you this morning. Different person. Same reason. She'd stolen food. They beat her in the square and everyone watched. I watched. I stood there and did nothing because I was 16 and scared, and I told myself it wasn't my business." He rinsed the rag, wrung it out. The water turned pink. "She died 3 days later. Infection. And I spent the next 10 years wondering if I could have stopped it. If stepping in would have made a difference. So when I saw them dragging you out this morning, I figured maybe this time I'd find out." Clara twisted to look at him. His face was unreadable, focused on her back, but there was something in the set of his jaw that looked like old guilt. "You think saving me makes up for her?" "No, nothing makes up for her. But maybe it means something anyway." He finished cleaning the last wound and set the rag aside. Then he pulled a small tin from the shelf, some kind of salve that smelled like pine and something sharper. He rubbed it on each welt, and Clara felt the burn ease a little. "You should rest," Elias said when he was done. "You're going to feel worse tomorrow." "How much worse?" "A lot worse. But you'll heal." He handed her a shirt, one of his, soft worn flannel that was 3 sizes too big. Clara pulled it on, grateful for the warmth and coverage. Then she lay back on the bed, every muscle screaming its complaint. Elias stood up. "I'll make something to eat. You need food in you." "I'm not hungry." "You haven't eaten in 3 days. You're eating." Clara wanted to argue, but he was already moving toward the fireplace, pulling out a pot, filling it with water and dried meat, and something that looked like it had once been vegetables. She watched him work, efficient, practiced, like he'd done this 1,000 times, and felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she wasn't alone. It was a small thing, fragile, but it was something. "Elias?" she said. He glanced back. "Yeah, thank you." He held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. "Get some rest, Clara. We'll talk tomorrow." Clara closed her eyes. Outside, wind moaned through the pines. Inside, the fire crackled. And somewhere between the pain and the exhaustion and the warmth seeping into her bones, she drifted off. When she woke, she didn't know how much later. The cabin was dark except for the fireplace and a single candle burning on the table. Elias was sitting in the chair, his back to her, cleaning a rifle. He moved with quiet precision, each motion deliberate. Clara watched him for a while, too tired to speak, and thought about how strange it was that a day could start with you dying and end with you saved. She didn't trust it yet. Didn't trust him. Not really. Trust took time, and she'd run out of that commodity a long time ago. But lying there in his cabin, wearing his shirt, with his fire keeping her warm, Clara thought maybe, just maybe, she'd bought herself a little more time after all. And for tonight, that was enough. Clara woke to the smell of something burning. Not the cabin, nothing that urgent, just whatever Elias had left too close to the fire. She opened her eyes to gray morning light filtering through a window she hadn't noticed last night. Her back felt like someone had taken a hammer to it. Every breath pulled at the welts, and when she tried to sit up, her muscles staged a full rebellion. "Don't move too fast." Elias was at the fireplace, rescuing what looked like flatbread from the edge of the flames. He glanced back at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "How bad?" he asked. "Bad? Scale of 1 to 10? 15. He almost smiled. Almost. "That's about right for day 2. Told you it'd get worse." Clara managed to prop herself up on one elbow. The cabin looked different in daylight, smaller somehow, but more solid. Shelves lined one wall, packed with supplies that looked like they'd been carefully rationed. Traps hung from hooks near the door. A pair of snowshoes leaned in the corner. Everything had its place. Everything spoke to a life lived alone and organized by necessity. "What time is it?" Clara asked. "Late. You slept through most of yesterday and all of last night." "Yesterday?" "You passed out pretty hard. I checked on you a few times, but you needed the rest more than you needed to be awake." Clara tried to piece together the gaps in her memory. She remembered the warmth of the cabin, the taste of something hot and salty that Elias had made her eat. After that, nothing, just black. Elias brought over a tin plate with the flatbread and some kind of dried meat, set it on the bed beside her. "Eat. Slow. Your stomach's not used to regular food." "I know how to eat." "I'm sure you do. I'm also sure if you wolf it down, you'll throw it up in about 10 minutes and waste food we can't afford to waste." He had a point. Clara picked up the bread and took a small bite. It was dense and slightly burnt, but it tasted better than anything she'd eaten in months. She forced herself to chew slowly, swallow, wait. Her stomach growled, but didn't revolt. Elias watched her for a moment, then went back to the fireplace. He was wearing different clothes than yesterday, same general idea, just cleaner. Heavy wool pants, a shirt that had been patched in 3 places, boots that looked like they'd walked 1,000 miles and had 1,000 more in them. "Where are we exactly?" Clara asked between bites. "High Valley. About 8 miles northeast of Black Ridge as the crow flies. Probably closer to 12 if you're actually walking it." "You come down often?" "Twice a year. Sometimes 3 if I need something I can't make or trap." "That's it? Just you up here?" "Just me." Clara studied him. There was a carefulness to how he moved, like he was used to navigating spaces alone. No wasted motion, no unnecessary sound. The kind of efficiency you developed when you didn't have anyone to talk to. "Don't you get lonely?" Elias stirred something in the pot over the fire. "Sometimes, but lonely's better than the alternative." "Which is?" "People." Clara almost laughed, but it hurt too much. She took another bite of bread instead. "Can't argue with that." They sat in silence for a while. Outside, wind rattled the shutters. Clara could hear pine branches scraping against the roof, and somewhere farther off, a sound that might have been a bird or might have been the mountain settling into itself. "What happens now?" she asked finally. Elias looked at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you saved me. You brought me here. You fed me. But I can't stay forever, and I can't go back to Black Ridge. So what happens?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he set down the spoon he'd been using and came to sit in the chair near the bed. Not close, but close enough that they could talk without raising their voices. "Here's what I figure," he said. "You need at least a week before you can travel. Maybe 2. Those welts are going to take time to heal, and if you try to move before they do, you'll tear something open and end up with an infection. So first thing that happens is you rest. And after that? After that, you choose. You can head west. There's a trading post about 40 miles that way. They don't ask questions, and they don't care where you came from. You could probably find work there, or at least catch a ride to somewhere bigger. Or you can head south into the territories. It's rough, but it's empty. Plenty of places to disappear." "What about north?" "North is more mountains. Nothing up there but cold and things that want to eat you." Clara nodded slowly, west or south. Both options sounded equally impossible. 40 miles in winter with no supplies and a back that barely worked. Or south into empty territory where disappear could mean a lot of things, most of them permanent. "There's a third option," Elias said. "Which is?" "You stay here for a while, until you figure out what you actually want to do." Clara stared at him. "Why would you offer that?" "Because I've got space. I've got food, and winter's not a good time to be wandering around without a plan. You don't know me. No. But I know you're not stupid enough to steal for fun, and I know you didn't deserve what Black Ridge did to you. That's enough." "What do you get out of it?" Elias shrugged. "Company, maybe. Someone to talk to besides myself. Someone to help with chores once you're healed up. This place takes work to maintain, and I'm not getting any younger." Clara wanted to find the catch. There had to be a catch. Men didn't just offer women shelter and food and safety without wanting something in return. That wasn't how the world worked. But when she looked at Elias, all she saw was tired honesty. "I can't pay you," she said. "Didn't ask you to." "And you're not going to—" Clara stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence without making it ugly. Elias's jaw tightened. "No, I'm not. You'll have the bed. I'll sleep by the fire. And if I ever make you uncomfortable, you tell me and I'll back off. That's the deal." The deal. Like it was simple. Like trust was something you could just hand over because someone said the right words. But Clara was tired. Tired of running, tired of hurting, tired of being afraid of every shadow. And Elias had proven something yesterday that nobody else in her life had bothered to prove, that he was willing to take a hit for her. That counted for something. "Okay," she said. "Okay? I'll stay, for a while, until I figure things out." Elias nodded. "Good. Then first order of business is getting you strong enough to walk around without looking like you're about to collapse." "I don't look that bad." "You look like death had a rough night. Finish your food." Clara did. The meat was tougher than the bread, gamey and stringy, but she chewed it down. Her stomach accepted it grudgingly. When she was done, Elias took the plate and brought her water, cold and clean, tasting like snow. "Where does the water come from?" Clara asked. "Stream about 50 yards that way." He pointed toward the back of the cabin. "Runs year-round. Never freezes completely, even in deep winter. That's why I built here." "You built this yourself?" "Took me 2 summers. I'm not a carpenter, so it's rough work, but it keeps the wind out." Clara looked around the cabin again with new eyes. The walls weren't perfectly straight. The door sat slightly crooked in its frame, but everything was solid, functional, built by someone who understood that survival didn't care about perfection. "It's good work," she said. Elias didn't respond to that. He just went back to his routine, cleaning the pot, checking the fire, moving through the space with that same careful efficiency. Clara watched him and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safe. Not completely. Safety was a luxury people like her didn't get to keep. But enough. For now. The day passed slowly. Clara dozed on and off, her body demanding rest. It had been denied for months. Every time she woke, Elias was doing something, mending a trap, sharpening a knife, checking supplies. He worked quietly, never pushing conversation, never demanding anything from her. Around what must have been mid-afternoon, Clara managed to sit up without wanting to scream. Progress. She tested her legs, swinging them over the side of the bed. They held her weight when she stood, though everything protested. "Where are you going?" Elias asked from across the cabin. "Just stretching. I can't lie down forever." "You can lie down for another day at least." "I need to move." Elias set down the trap he'd been working on. "Fine. But you're not going outside. It's too cold and you'll tear something." Clara took a step, then another. Her back pulled with each movement, but it was bearable. She made it to the table, braced herself against it, and looked at Elias. "See? I'm fine." "You're stubborn." "Same thing." This time he did smile. Small, barely there, but real. "Fair enough." Clara made a slow circuit of the cabin. It wasn't large, 20 paces from one end to the other, but by the time she completed the loop, she was sweating and her vision had gone fuzzy at the edges. She sat down heavily in the chair. "Happy?" Elias asked. "Not particularly." "Good. That means you're learning your limits." Clara wanted to snap at him, but she was too tired. She just sat there, breathing hard, while Elias went back to his trap. Outside, the light was starting to fade. The mountains always ate the sun early in winter. "Tell me about Black Ridge," Elias said after a while. "How long were you there?" "My whole life, born there. Thought I'd die there too, just not like that." "What happened to your family?" Clara hesitated. This was dangerous territory, the kind of conversation that exposed things she usually kept buried. But Elias had already seen her at her worst. What was a little honesty compared to that? "My father died in the mines 5 years ago. Cave-in. They never found his body. My mother lasted about 6 months after that before her lungs gave out. And my brother," she stopped, swallowed. "He drowned in a shaft that flooded. I was 19. I'm sorry." "Everyone's sorry. Sorry doesn't pay debts." "Your father owed money?" "Half the town. He liked to gamble, liked to drink, liked to make promises he couldn't keep. When he died, all of that landed on me." Elias set down the trap. "And they expected you to pay?" "Expected me to pay, or to marry someone who'd pay for me. When I wouldn't do either, they made it clear I wasn't welcome. I tried to work, tried the laundry, tried the boarding house, but nobody would hire me, said I was tainted, said I'd bring bad luck." "So you starved." "So I starved. For a while I survived on scraps and charity, but charity runs out when winter comes. 3 days ago I broke into the feed shed because I thought maybe pig feed was better than nothing. Turns out I was wrong." Clara looked at her hands. They were thin, the bones prominent, nails broken and dirty despite Elias's attempts to clean her up. They looked like the hands of someone who'd been dying slowly and hadn't noticed until it was almost too late. "Why didn't you leave?" Elias asked. "Before it got that bad?" "Where would I go? I had no money, no supplies, no idea how to survive out here. Leaving would have meant dying faster. At least in Black Ridge I knew where to find water, knew which alleys stayed warmest at night." "That's not living." "No, but it's not dying either, or at least it's dying slower." Elias stood up and moved to the window. He looked out at the darkening forest, his back to her. "I left my town when I was 23. Thought I'd make something of myself somewhere else. Took me about 6 months to realize I didn't fit anywhere. Cities were too loud, small towns were just different versions of the same cruelty. So I came up here." "And that's better?" "Different, not better or worse, just different. Up here, if something wants to kill me, it's honest about it. Bears don't pretend they're doing it for my own good." Clara almost laughed. "That's a low bar. Maybe. But it's my bar." He turned back to face her. In the fading light, his features were half shadow, half definition. He looked older than he had yesterday. Or maybe Clara was just seeing him more clearly. "You can have different," Elias said. "If you want it, that's what I'm offering. Not perfect, not easy, but different." Clara held his gaze. "And if I can't do the work? If I'm too weak or too broken? Then we'll figure it out. I've survived alone for 7 years. I can handle carrying a little extra weight until you find your feet." It should have sounded patronizing. Should have felt like pity. But Elias said it the same way he'd say the sky was blue or winter was cold, just a statement of fact, no judgment attached. "Okay, Clara said again, because what else was there to say? They ate dinner as true dark settled in. Elias made more flatbread and a thin stew with dried vegetables and rabbit he'd trapped yesterday. It wasn't fancy, but it was hot and filling, and Clara ate 2 full bowls before her stomach finally signaled it was done. After dinner, Elias showed her around the cabin properly. The shelves held supplies organized by type, dried meat on one, grains and flour on another, tools on a third. Everything labeled, everything tracked. He pulled down a ledger and showed her his inventory system. "This is how I know what I have and what I need," he explained. "Every time I use something, I mark it. Every time I bring something in, I mark it. Keeps me from running out of critical supplies midwinter." Clara studied the ledger. His handwriting was cramped but legible, each entry dated and detailed. January 15th, used 2 pounds flour. January 18th, trapped rabbit, added to stores. January 23rd, used last of coffee. "You ran out of coffee?" 3 weeks ago. I'll get more when I go down to the trading post in spring." "You can last that long without it?" Elias shrugged. "I can last without a lot of things when I have to." He showed her where he kept the medical supplies. Basic stuff. Bandages and salves and a needle and thread for stitching. Showed her the hooks where he hung game when he trapped it. Showed her the corner where he kept firewood stacked, and explained how he made sure never to let it get below a certain level because running out of wood meant freezing to death. "There's rhythm to it," he said. "Once you learn the patterns, it becomes second nature. Check the traps every morning. Chop wood every afternoon. Keep the fire going. Keep yourself fed. Keep moving." Sounds lonely. It is, but loneliness is manageable. You get used to it. Clara wasn't sure she believed that, but she didn't argue. Instead, she asked, "What happens if you get hurt? Out here alone?" "I don't." "That's not an answer." Elias met her eyes. "It's the only answer I've got. You don't get hurt because you can't afford to. You move carefully. You think before you act. You don't take stupid risks. And if you do anyway, then I guess I die. But I haven't yet, so the system works." It was a brutal kind of logic, but Clara understood it. She'd been living by similar rules in Blackridge. Don't get sick, don't get injured, don't draw attention. Survival meant eliminating variables you couldn't control. As night deepened, Elias laid out his bedroll by the fire. It was a simple setup, a few thick furs and a wool blanket. He gestured toward the bed. "That's yours. I'll be here. I can take the floor. You gave me the bed last night, and I'm giving it to you tonight. You need the support while your back heals. I've slept on worse." Clara wanted to argue, but her body was already making the decision for her. She moved to the bed, every muscle aching, and lowered herself down carefully. The mattress, stuffed with something that might have been straw or dried grass, accepted her weight with a soft sigh. Elias banked the fire and blew out the lantern. The cabin fell into darkness, broken only by the red glow of embers. "Elias?" Clara said into the quiet. "Yeah? Why did you really help me?" Silence stretched. Clara thought maybe he wasn't going to answer. Then, "Because I was tired of watching people get hurt and pretending it wasn't my problem. And because you looked like you'd fight if you had anything left to fight with. I respect that." Clara closed her eyes. "I don't feel like much of a fighter." "You're alive. That counts." She wanted to believe him, wanted to think that survival meant something beyond just prolonging the inevitable. But belief required hope, and hope was expensive. Still, lying there in the dark with a fire keeping the cold at bay, and a stranger who'd become something like an ally sleeping a few feet away, Clara felt the smallest flicker of something that might have been hope, or might have just been exhaustion playing tricks. Either way, she'd take it. Days blurred together after that. Clara spent most of her time sleeping and eating and trying to regain strength she'd lost over months of slow starvation. Elias kept to his routine, checking traps, chopping wood, maintaining the cabin, but he was always there when she needed something. Water, food, help changing the bandages on her back. On the 4th day, Clara managed to walk outside. The cold hit her like a physical thing, stealing her breath. But underneath the cold was something else. Space. Air that didn't taste like smoke and desperation. Mountains rising in every direction, indifferent and massive. Sky so blue it hurt to look at. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Elias said from behind her. Clara nodded, unable to speak. They stood there together, not talking, just breathing in the frozen silence of the high country. And for the first time since Clara could remember, she didn't feel small. She felt like maybe, possibly, she was exactly the right size for the space she was standing in. It was a start. By the 10th day, Clara could split wood. Not well. Her first swing sent the axe blade skittering off the log and nearly into her foot. But she could do it. Elias watched from the cabin door, arms crossed, expression somewhere between concerned and amused. "You're going to lose a toe," he called out. "I'm fine." That's what people say right before they lose a toe. Clara reset her stance, gripped the axe tighter, and swung again. This time the blade bit into the wood. Not deep enough to split it, but deep enough to matter. She worked the axe free and tried again. 3 swings later, the log finally cracked apart. "There," Clara said, breathing hard. "See?" Elias walked over and picked up the 2 pieces, examined them like he was judging art. "Uneven, you're favoring your left side because your right shoulder's still weak. It's split, isn't it? Split and useful are different things. But it's a start." He set the wood down and took the axe from her. "Watch. You're coming down at an angle. You want straight vertical? Let gravity do the work, like this." He demonstrated, one clean motion, the log splitting perfectly down the middle. Made it look easy. Made it look like the wood wanted to come apart. "Show off," Clara muttered. "Practice, you'll get there." He handed the axe back and went inside, leaving her alone with the woodpile. Clara stood there for a moment, axe heavy in her hands, and felt something shift in her chest. Pride, maybe. Or just relief that she could do something besides eat and sleep and hurt. She split 4 more logs before her back started screaming. Not bad for someone who'd been half dead 2 weeks ago. Inside, Elias had soup going. Clara had learned his patterns by now. Soup for lunch, flatbread, and whatever protein he'd trapped for dinner, water before bed. Efficient, predictable, safe. "How's the back?" he asked without looking up from the pot. "Itchy." "That's good. Means it's healing." "Itchy isn't good. Itchy is annoying." "Would you rather it still hurt?" Clara sat down at the table. "No, but I'd rather it be done." "Give it another week. The welts are closing up, but the bruising goes deep. You rush it, you'll tear something." He ladled soup into 2 bowls and brought them over. Clara had stopped feeling guilty about eating his food somewhere around day 5. Guilt required energy she didn't have, and Elias never acted like she was a burden. He just kept feeding her, kept teaching her, kept existing in that steady way that made everything feel less urgent. "I was thinking," Clara said between spoonfuls, "about what you said. About helping with chores. You're already helping. I split 5 logs. You split 50 every day. You split 5 logs after being half dead 2 weeks ago. That's better than nothing." Clara set down her spoon. "I need to do more. I can't just sit here and let you carry everything." Elias studied her across the table. His eyes were the same color as the pine bark outside. Dark, textured, hard to read. "You trying to prove something?" "I'm trying to be useful." "You're healing. That's useful." "Elias, Clara." He said her name firmly, cutting her off. "I've been alone up here for 7 years. I know how to handle the work. What I don't know how to handle is you pushing yourself too hard and ending up worse than when you started. So here's the deal. You help when you can, you rest when you can't, and you stop treating this like you owe me something." "I do owe you." "No, you don't. I made a choice. You didn't ask me to make it. That means it's mine to carry, not yours." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to explain that debt wasn't always about asking, that sometimes it just existed whether you wanted it to or not. But Elias had already gone back to his soup. The conversation closed in that way he had. Not angry, just done. They ate in silence. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Clara listened to it and thought about how different silence sounded up here compared to Black Ridge. In town, silence meant danger, meant people watching, judging, waiting for you to slip. Here, silence was just the mountain breathing. After lunch, Elias taught her how to check the trap line. They walked northeast from the cabin, following a trail that was barely visible under the snow. Elias moved like he'd walked this path 1,000 times, his feet finding solid ground without seeming to look for it. Clara followed, trying to match his steps, failing more often than not. "How many traps do you have?" she asked. 12. spread out over about 3 miles. I check them every morning, reset whatever needs resetting. Well, what if something big gets caught, bear or mountain lion? Then I leave it and come back with the rifle. But that's rare. Most of what I catch is rabbit, sometimes fox, occasionally a deer if I'm lucky. They reach the first trap, a wire snare set near a game trail. Empty. Elias checked the mechanism, made a small adjustment, and moved on. The second trap held a rabbit, dead, frozen stiff, but fresh enough to be useful. Good size, Elias said, working the rabbit free. This'll last us a few days. He reset the snare with quick, practiced hands. Clara watched, trying to memorize the process. Loop here, tension there, trigger balanced just right. It looked simple when he did it. She knew it wouldn't be when she tried. They walked the whole line, found 3 more rabbits and 1 fox. Elias carried them all in a canvas bag slung over his shoulder, the weight barely seeming to register. Do you ever feel bad? Clara asked as they headed back. Killing them? Sometimes, but feeling bad doesn't keep you alive, and I use everything. Meat, fur, bones. Nothing gets wasted. That's the agreement. Agreement with who? The mountain. You take, you use, you respect. Long as you follow that, the mountain lets you stay. It sounded almost spiritual the way he said it, but Clara knew better. Elias wasn't a religious man. She'd never seen him pray, never heard him invoke anything beyond practical reality. This was just survival dressed up in language that made it bearable. Back at the cabin, Elias showed her how to skin and dress the game. It was messy work, bloodier than Clara expected, but she didn't flinch. She'd seen worse. Done worse, probably, in those last desperate weeks in Blackridge when she'd eaten things she didn't want to think about. You're good at this, Elias said, watching her work on the second rabbit. My father used to hunt, before the gambling got bad. He taught me some. Did he teach you anything else useful? Clara's hand stilled. He taught me that people will love you right up until you become inconvenient. Then they'll forget you existed. Elias didn't respond to that. He just kept working on the fox pelt, scraping it clean with careful precision. They worked until the light started to fail. By then, they had 4 rabbits dressed and hanging in the cold room, a small addition Elias had built onto the back of the cabin, and 1 fox pelt stretched on a drying frame. Clara's hands were numb and stained red, but she felt something close to accomplished. Dinner was rabbit stew. Elias added wild onions he'd stored from last fall and some kind of root vegetable Clara didn't recognize. It was the best thing she'd eaten since arriving, which wasn't saying much, but still. Tomorrow I need to go check the far traps, Elias said while they ate. The ones up near the ridge. It's a longer walk, probably 6 hours round trip. I can come. Your back? My back is fine, or fine enough. I can walk 6 hours. Elias looked at her, measuring. It's rough terrain, steep in places. And if we run into weather, it gets dangerous fast. I can handle it. I'm not questioning if you can handle it. I'm questioning if you should. Clara set down her spoon. Elias, I've been here almost 2 weeks. I can't spend the rest of winter sitting in this cabin. I need to move. I need to do something. He held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but we leave at first light, and if I say we turn back, we turn back. No arguing. Deal. They spent the evening preparing. Elias packed supplies in his rucksack. Rope, knife, extra snares, fire-starting kit, dried meat. He gave Clara one of his old coats, heavier than the one she'd been wearing, and a pair of gloves that were too big but better than nothing. Layers, he said. You want to stay warm but not sweating. Sweat freezes, and frozen sweat kills you. I know. I'm sure you do. I'm telling you anyway. Clara pulled on the coat. It smelled like smoke and pine and something else. Something that was just Elias. She tried not to think about that too hard. That night, lying in the dark listening to Elias breathe by the fire, Clara felt her heartbeat pick up. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow she'd be doing something real, something that mattered. And if she could handle that, maybe she could handle whatever came next. Maybe. They left before dawn. The world was still dark, the stars sharp and cold overhead. Elias carried the rucksack and his rifle. Clara carried a smaller pack with water and extra food. They moved northeast, climbing steadily into terrain that grew rougher with each mile. The sun came up slow, painting the snow gold and pink. Clara had forgotten how beautiful the world could be. In Blackridge, beauty was something that happened to other people in other places. Here, it was everywhere, in the way the light caught on ice crystals, in the silence broken only by their breathing, in the mountains rising around them like they'd been waiting forever and could wait forever more. "You doing okay?" Elias asked after the first hour. "Yeah." "Back?" "Sore, but manageable." He nodded and kept walking. They found the first ridge trap empty. The second held a marten, small, with dark fur that gleamed in the morning light. Elias dispatched it quickly, reset the trap, and they moved on. The terrain got steeper. Clara's legs burned, her breath coming harder, but she pushed through it. She'd promised she could handle this. She'd be damned if she'd prove herself wrong. Around mid-morning, they stopped to rest on an outcropping that overlooked the valley below. Clara could see for miles, forest and snow and mountains stacked one behind the other until they blurred into sky. "There's Blackridge," Elias said, pointing south. Clara followed his finger. The town was tiny from here, just a smudge of gray against white. Smoke rose from chimneys. People were down there living their lives, probably not thinking about her at all. "Good. Do you think they'll come looking?" Clara asked. Elias was quiet for a moment, then, eventually. "What makes you think that?" "Because Drummond's not the kind of man who likes being challenged. What I did, cutting you loose, walking you out, that made him look weak in front of the whole town. He'll want to fix that." Clara's stomach tightened. "When?" "Hard to say. Could be weeks, could be months. Winter makes everything harder, so maybe not until spring. But he'll come." "And what do we do when he does?" Elias looked at her. "We handle it. That's not a plan. It's the only plan I've got. Cross that bridge when we get there." Clara wanted to push, wanted to demand details and contingencies and something that felt like control, but Elias had already stood up, shouldering his pack, and the conversation was over. They walked on. The third trap had been triggered but was empty. Something had taken the bait and escaped. Elias cursed under his breath, reset it, and moved to the fourth, also empty. The fifth held another rabbit, frozen solid. "Light day," Elias said. "We'll come back in 2 days. Try again." They started back. The descent was harder than the climb, gravity pulling at Clara's legs, threatening to send her stumbling. Twice she slipped on ice. Both times, Elias caught her without making it seem like a big deal. "Thanks," Clara said after the second time. "That's what the rope's for." He gestured to the coil attached to his pack. "If you fall, I don't want you taking me with you." Comforting. Honest. They were maybe an hour from the cabin when Elias stopped. Clara almost walked into him. "What?" He held up a hand. Silent. Clara froze. At first she didn't hear anything. Then, faint but growing closer, voices. Men's voices, rough and traveling through cold air like bells. Elias's jaw tightened. He pulled Clara off the trail, into a thick stand of pines. They crouched behind a fallen log, barely breathing. The voices got louder. Clara counted 3 of them, maybe 4. They were coming up the trail from the south, from the direction of Blackridge. "Waste of time," one voice was saying. "They could be anywhere." Drummond said, "Check the high country." A second voice, deeper. "So we check the high country. In the middle of winter, they're probably dead already. Then we find the bodies and go home." Clara felt Elias tense beside her. His hand moved to his rifle. The men came into view. 4 of them, just like she'd guessed. Clara recognized 2, Samuel Cross from the stables and Eddie Marsh, the one who'd laughed while Drummond beat her. The other 2 were younger, maybe 20, brothers by the look of them. All 4 carried rifles. They walked past the hiding spot without slowing, kept going up the trail, voices fading into the trees. Elias and Clara stayed frozen for another 5 minutes. Then 10. When Elias finally moved, it was slow and careful. "They're headed for the ridge," he whispered. "We need to get back to the cabin. Now." They moved fast, abandoning caution for speed. Clara's back screamed, her legs threatened to give out, but fear was a better motivator than pain. They covered the last mile in maybe 20 minutes, a pace that should have been impossible given the terrain. The cabin appeared ahead, untouched. Elias slowed, checking the area with practiced eyes. Nothing looked disturbed. He went in first, rifle ready, and Clara followed. Inside was exactly how they'd left it. But the safety Clara had started to feel here was gone, replaced by something sharp and immediate. "They found us," Clara said. Her voice shook. "Not yet, but they will. Those traps we checked, they'll find them. They'll know someone's living up here." "What do we do?" Elias set down his rifle and started moving around the cabin. He checked the supplies, counted ammunition, examined the door and windows like he was calculating how well they'd hold. "We prepare," he said. "They'll probably head back to town today, report what they found. Then they'll come back. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe the day after. With more men." "With more men." Clara sat down at the table. Her hands were shaking. "I should go. I should leave. If you're not here, I'm still the man who cut you loose and made Drummond look like a fool. They're coming for me too, Clara. Has nothing to do with you anymore." "That's not true." "Maybe not. But it doesn't change anything." Elias came to sit across from her. "Here's what we know. They want you back to finish what they started. They want me dead or gone, and they've got at least 4 men, probably more. We're outnumbered, but we've got terrain, and we've got supplies. That counts for something." "Against rifles?" "Against everything. This is my mountain. I know every trail, every hiding spot, every advantage. They're walking into my world now, not theirs." Clara wanted to believe him, wanted to think that knowing the terrain was enough. But she'd seen what men with guns could do. She'd seen Blackridge turn violent over less. "I'm scared," she said quietly. "Good. Scared keeps you sharp. Just don't let it make you freeze." They spent the rest of the day preparing. Elias showed Clara how to load and fire the rifle, the weight of it, the kick against her shoulder, the way you had to breathe out before squeezing the trigger. She practiced on a tree maybe 30 yards out, missing twice before finally hitting bark. "Better," Elias said. "But you're pulling left. Keep the barrel steady." Clara tried again. This time the shot hit closer to center. "There. Now do it 50 more times until your muscles remember." She didn't do 50, but she did 20. By the end, her shoulder ached and her ears rang, but she could hit the tree more often than not. Inside, Elias reinforced the door with extra timber, checked the shutters on the windows, filled every container they had with water in case they couldn't get to the stream, moved supplies into the cold room where they'd be harder to reach if someone broke in. "Are we under siege?" Clara asked, watching him work. "Not yet, but we might be soon." "And if they don't come back? If they just went up to look and didn't find anything?" Elias stopped, wiped sweat from his forehead. "Then we wasted a day preparing for nothing. I can live with that." They ate dinner in tense silence. The food tasted like ash in Clara's mouth. She kept listening for sounds outside, footsteps, voices, the click of a rifle being cocked. But there was nothing. Just wind. Just the cabin settling. Just her own fear making noise in her head. That night, Elias didn't sleep by the fire. He sat in the chair near the door, rifle across his lap, eyes on the window. Clara tried to sleep but couldn't. She just lay there in the dark, listening to her heartbeat, waiting for the world to break open. Around midnight, snow started falling. Clara watched it through the gap in the shutters, thick flakes that came down straight and heavy. Within an hour, the world outside was white and formless. "That'll slow them down," Elias said from his chair. "Can't track in a fresh snowfall." "How long will it last?" "Could be an hour. Could be 3 days. Weather up here doesn't follow rules." Clara pulled the blanket tighter. "What happens if they come during the storm?" "Then they're stupider than I thought. Nobody walks mountain trails in a whiteout unless they want to die." But Clara could hear something in his voice, a tension that suggested he wasn't as confident as he sounded. The snow fell through the night. By dawn, it was still coming down. Elias finally dozed off in the chair, his head tilted back, rifle still in his lap. Clara watched him sleep and thought about how quickly everything had changed. 2 weeks ago, she'd been dying in Blackridge. Now she was here, in a cabin in the mountains, preparing for violence she'd thought she'd left behind. Full circle. That's what this was. Full circle, but maybe this time she'd have something to fight with besides desperation. She hoped. When Elias woke around mid-morning, the snow had stopped. 2 feet of fresh powder covered everything. It was beautiful and terrible. Beautiful because it made the world clean. Terrible because it meant anyone could see their tracks, could follow them straight to the cabin. They'll wait for this to settle. Elias said, looking out at the white. Give it a day or two, then they'll come. How do you know? Because that's what I do. Use the storm as cover to get closer, wait for the snow to compact enough to walk on, then move in. Clara joined him at the window. We could run. Head west, like you said, to that trading post. In this? We'd freeze before we made it 5 miles, and they'd track us anyway. So we stay. So we stay. Clara looked at him. At this man who'd saved her for reasons she still didn't fully understand, who'd fed her and sheltered her and taught her how to survive, who was now preparing to fight for her. Again. I'm sorry, she said. Elias turned to face her. For what? For bringing this to your door. You didn't bring anything. They brought it. We're just the ones dealing with it. Still, Clara. He said her name like it was something important. I'm not sorry I helped you. Not sorry you're here. Whatever happens next, that doesn't change. You understand? She nodded, throat tight. Good. Now help me figure out how to keep us both alive. They spent the day planning. Elias drew a rough map of the area around the cabin, marking approaches, cover, sight lines. He explained how they'd defend if it came to that. Clara inside with the spare rifle, Elias outside using the terrain to pick them off before they got close. But that's worst case, he said. Best case, they come, they don't find us, they leave. You believe that? No, but I'm hoping anyway. The second night was worse than the first. Every sound outside made Clara flinch. Every branch breaking under snow, every gust of wind. It all sounded like men with guns getting closer. Elias stayed awake again, watching. Clara dozed fitfully, waking every hour to check that he was still there. On the third day the men came. Clara saw them first, 4 shapes moving through the trees maybe 200 yards out. She grabbed Elias, pointed. He looked, swore quietly, and grabbed his rifle. Get inside. Bar the door. Don't shoot unless they get past me. Elias, do it. Clara ran for the cabin. Behind her, she heard Elias calling out to the approaching men, his voice carrying across the snow. That's far enough. The shapes stopped. One of them shouted back, but Clara couldn't make out the words. She barred the door from inside, grabbed the spare rifle, positioned herself by the window. Through the gap in the shutters, she could see Elias standing in front of the cabin. Alone. Rifle raised, 4 men facing him, weapons ready. And Clara knew, whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same again. Through the gap in the shutters, Clara watched the standoff crystallize in the snow. Elias stood maybe 30 feet from the cabin, rifle aimed at the center man. The 4 from Black Ridge had spread out in a loose line, weapons raised but not quite pointed. Not yet. They were calculating, weighing odds, measuring distance, trying to figure out if this was worth dying over. I said that's far enough. Elias's voice was steady, carrying across the cold air without strain. The center man, Samuel Cross, Clara could see him clearly now, took another step forward. Testing. Elias fired. The shot kicked up snow 2 feet in front of Samuel's boot. The sound echoed off the mountains, sharp and final. Samuel froze. Next one won't miss, Elias said. Easy, Crow. Samuel raised one hand, the other still holding his rifle. We're just here to talk. Then talk from where you are. Drummond sent us. Wants his property back. He doesn't own people. The thief does. She stole, she ran, and you helped her. That makes you guilty too. Clara's hands tightened on her rifle. Through the window, she could see Eddie Marsh shifting to the left, trying to flank. The 2 brothers moved right. They were boxing Elias in, slow and careful, thinking he wouldn't notice. He noticed. Tell your boys to stop moving or I start shooting for real, Elias said, swinging his rifle toward Eddie. Eddie froze mid-step. Samuel tried a different approach. Look, nobody wants trouble. Just give us the girl and we'll go. You can stay up here, keep living however you want. This doesn't have to get ugly. It got ugly the day you beat a starving woman for taking pig feed. She broke the law. Your law, not mine. The law is the law, Crow. You don't get to pick and choose. Neither does Drummond, but here we are. The wind picked up, blowing snow between them. Clara watched Elias's shoulders, the way he held himself, ready but not tense, aware but not scared. He looked like he'd done this before, like standing in front of armed men was just another Tuesday. We can wait you out, Samuel said. Winter's long. You'll run out of supplies eventually. Maybe, but you'll freeze to death long before that happens. I've got shelter. You've got what? Couple days of food? 3 at most? Good luck making it back to Blackridge when the next storm hits. Samuel's jaw tightened. Clara could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. How many days they'd already been out. How much food they had left. Whether Drummond's pride was worth dying in the snow. I've got orders, Samuel said finally. Then you've got a problem. Because I'm not giving you anything, and I'm not letting you pass this point. So either you leave, or we find out how many of you I can drop before you get me. That's suicide. For one of us, yeah. Question is which one? The brothers were getting nervous. Clara could see it in how they shifted weight, and how their eyes kept darting between Samuel and Elias and the tree line. They were young, probably got recruited because they needed money, and this seemed easier than mining. Now they were realizing that easy and safe were different things. Eddie Marsh wasn't nervous. Eddie looked eager. His finger was on the trigger, his eyes locked on Elias like he was just waiting for permission. Samuel, Elias said, his tone shifting slightly. You've got a wife, 2 kids. I've seen them in town. Little girl's what, 5 now? Boy's 7? Samuel's expression flickered. Don't. I'm not threatening, I'm reminding. You die up here, what happens to them? Drummond gonna take care of your family, or are they just gonna be another widow and orphans nobody wants to deal with? Shut your mouth. Think about it. Is this worth it? Really? For a moment, Clara thought it might work. Thought Samuel might lower his rifle, call this off, take his men home. She could see him wavering, the anger warring with something that looked like fear. Then Eddie Marsh fired. The shot went wide. Eddie was too eager, too pumped on adrenaline to aim properly, but it shattered the stillness like glass. Elias dropped to one knee and returned fire in one smooth motion. Eddie went down screaming, clutching his leg. After that, everything happened fast. The brothers opened fire. Bullets tore into the snow around Elias. He rolled left, came up behind a tree, fired twice more. One of the brothers dropped. The other dove for cover, still shooting. Samuel was running now, trying to close the distance while Elias was pinned. Clara saw him coming, saw the angle he was taking. He'd be at the cabin in seconds, and Elias wouldn't be able to stop him from this position. Clara pushed open the shutter, raised her rifle, and fired. The kick nearly knocked her over. The shot went high and right, missing Samuel by 3 feet, but it made him stop, made him realize there was someone else shooting. He turned toward the cabin, bringing his rifle up. Clara fired again. This time she remembered to breathe out, remembered to keep the barrel steady. The shot caught Samuel in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. He didn't go down, but he wasn't running anymore. Elias used the distraction. He broke from cover, moving fast across the open ground, and slammed into Samuel before the man could recover. They went down together, rifles flying into the snow. The remaining brother was still shooting. Clara ducked back as bullets punched through the shutters, sending splinters flying. She could hear them hitting the logs behind her, hear the brother shouting something she couldn't make out. Then Elias's rifle fired 3 times in quick succession. The shooting stopped. Silence crashed down like a weight. Clara stayed frozen behind the wall, heart hammering, ears ringing. She couldn't see anything through the shattered shutter, couldn't hear anything except the wind and her own ragged breathing. Clara, Elias's voice rough but steady. It's clear. Come out. She didn't move. Couldn't. Her legs had turned to water. Clara. This time there was urgency in his voice. Clara forced herself up, forced her legs to work. She grabbed the rifle and stumbled to the door, threw off the bar, pushed it open. The scene outside looked like something out of a nightmare. Eddie Marsh was on his back in the snow, still screaming, blood spreading dark around his leg. One of the brothers lay motionless, maybe 20 yards out. The other brother was sitting with his hands up, eyes wide, no weapon in sight. And Samuel Cross was on his knees, Elias standing behind him with a rifle pressed to the back of his head. Drop it, Elias said when Clara appeared with her gun raised. I'm not. Drop it. You're shaking so hard you're going to shoot someone by accident. Clara looked at her hands. He was right. The rifle was trembling like she had fever. She set it down carefully against the cabin wall. Elias kept his eyes on Samuel. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to take your men and walk back to Blackridge. You're going to tell Drummond that if anyone else comes up here, I'll kill them. Not wound them, not scare them off, kill them. You understand? Samuel nodded, his face gray with pain. Say it. I understand. Good. Now get Eddie and your friend and start walking. My shoulder is bleeding but not fatal. You'll make it if you move fast. Stay up here. You'll freeze. Your choice. Samuel struggled to his feet, clutching his shoulder. The surviving brother, Clara still didn't know his name, ran to help Eddie. Together they dragged the screaming man upright. Eddie couldn't put weight on his leg, so they had to half carry him. What about Aaron? The brother asked, looking at the motionless figure in the snow. He's dead, Elias said flatly. You want to carry a corpse 12 miles, be my guest. Otherwise leave him. I'll bury him when the ground thaws. The brother's face crumpled, but he didn't argue. He and Samuel started moving, dragging Eddie between them. Eddie was still screaming, leaving a trail of blood in the white snow. Clara watched them go. It took forever. 3 men moving at a crawl, stopping every few yards when Eddie's screams got too loud or Samuel's shoulder gave him trouble. Elias watched too, rifle still raised, until they disappeared into the tree line. Then he lowered the gun and turned to Clara. You okay? Clara opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She tried again. I shot him. You did. I've never shot anyone before. I know. You did good. Good? I almost killed him. Almost doesn't count. And if you hadn't fired, he would have gotten to me. So yeah, good. Claire's legs finally gave out. She sat down hard in the snow, the cold seeping through her pants. Elias came over, checked her for injuries even though she kept saying she was fine. You're in shock, he said. That's normal. Just breathe. Clara breathed. In through her nose, out through her mouth. The world tilted, steadied, tilted again. There's a dead man, she said. Yeah. In the snow, right there. I see him. We killed him. I killed him. You wounded Samuel. There's a difference. Clara looked up at Elias. His face was harder than she'd ever seen it. Not angry, just carved out of something that didn't feel pain or guilt or anything soft. This was a different person than the man who'd taught her to split wood. This was someone who knew how to kill and didn't waste time feeling bad about it. Are you okay? Clara asked. The question seemed to surprise him. He looked at her for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes. Then he sat down in the snow beside her. No, he said quietly. But I will be. They sat there while the sun moved across the sky. Neither of them spoke. Around them, the mountain went back to being beautiful. All that white snow and blue sky and pine trees standing like witnesses. Like nothing had happened. Like men hadn't just tried to kill each other over scraps and pride. Finally, Elias stood up. We need to move the body. Can't leave him out here. Where? Cold room. Ground's too frozen to bury him properly, but I can keep him from the animals until spring. Clara helped. She didn't want to touch the dead man, didn't want to see his face up close. But Elias needed help, and she wasn't about to make him do it alone. They dragged Aaron's body to the cold room and laid him out on the floor. Clara tried not to look at the bullet hole in his chest. Back in the cabin, Elias cleaned and reloaded the rifles. Clara sat at the table, still shaking, watching him work. They'll come back, she said. Probably. With more men. Maybe. Or maybe Drummond will cut his losses. 3 men down, nothing to show for it. That's expensive. He might decide you're not worth it. You don't believe that. Elias set down the rifle he'd been cleaning. No, I don't. Drummond's not the type to let something go, but they won't come back right away. They need to heal, need to regroup. That gives us time. Time for what? To decide what we do next. Clara laughed, brittle and sharp. We just killed a man and shot 2 others. What's there to decide? Whether we run or stay, whether we keep fighting or find another way, whether this cabin is worth defending or if we should head west like I said before. You said we couldn't make it in winter. I said it would be hard, not impossible. And now we know they're hunting us. That changes things. Clara put her head in her hands. Her skull felt too small for her thoughts. Everything was moving too fast, spiraling out in directions she couldn't track. I need to sleep, she said. Not yet. I need you awake a little longer. Make sure you're not hurt worse than you think. I'm fine. You're not fine, neither am I, but we'll get there. Elias came over and crouched in front of her. Look at me. Clara did. His eyes were tired, ringed with something that looked like old pain. You saved my life today, he said. You understand that. If you hadn't fired when you did, Samuel would have gotten to me. I'd be dead right now. You saved mine first. This isn't a competition. I'm just saying, you did what needed doing. That matters. Clara felt something crack open in her chest. Not breaking exactly, more like shifting, making room for something new and hard and necessary. I don't want to be someone who shoots people, she whispered. Neither do I. But sometimes you don't get to choose what you become. You just get to choose whether you survive it. He stood up and went back to his work. Clara watched him move around the cabin, checking supplies, reinforcing the door again, preparing for the next attack like it was inevitable. Which maybe it was. That night, they both slept in shifts. Elias took the first watch while Clara lay in the bed, staring at the ceiling, seeing Erin's face every time she closed her eyes. Around midnight, they switched. Clara sat by the door with the rifle across her lap, jumping at every sound, while Elias sprawled by the fire and fell asleep so fast it looked like he'd been hit. Dawn came gray and cold. Clara was still awake, still sitting, still seeing blood in the snow. Elias woke up, looked at her, and sighed. You didn't sleep at all. Couldn't. Clara, don't. Just don't. He didn't. He just made breakfast, thin porridge with dried berries, and they ate in silence. Outside, birds were starting to sing. Spring birds, Clara thought. The ones that showed up when winter started thinking about loosening its grip. I want to bury him, Clara said. Who? Erin, the brother. I want to bury him properly. Elias set down his spoon. The ground's frozen solid. It'll take days to dig deep enough. Then we take days. Clara, he had a family probably. People who will wonder where he is. We can't just leave him in the cold room like he's meat. Elias studied her. You feel guilty. Yes. You shouldn't. He came here to hurt you. I know, but he's still dead and I still feel guilty, and I need to do something or I'm going to lose my mind, so I'm burying him. Elias looked like he wanted to argue. Then he nodded. Okay, we'll bury him. But we do it smart. Grave far from the cabin, no marker, nothing that leads anyone back here. And we take turns digging because this is going to be brutal work. They started that afternoon. Elias picked a spot about 100 yards northeast, in a clearing where the ground was slightly less frozen. Even so, it took them hours to break through the first layer of ice and frozen earth. Clara's hands blistered. Elias's back seized up twice. They took turns swinging the pick, chipping away inch by inch, while the other kept watch. It took 3 days to dig deep enough. 3 days of brutal, exhausting work that left them both wrecked. But by the end, they had a grave. Not pretty, not perfect, but deep enough that animals wouldn't dig him up. They wrapped Erin in canvas and lowered him down, filled the grave, packed the earth. Clara said a few words, nothing religious, just an acknowledgement that he'd existed, that he'd mattered to someone, that he deserved better than dying in the snow over someone else's grudge. Elias didn't say anything. He just stood there with his hat in his hands, face unreadable. When it was done, they walked back to the cabin. Neither of them spoke. There wasn't anything to say. That night, Clara finally slept, deep and dreamless, her body too exhausted to conjure nightmares. When she woke, sun was streaming through the window, and Elias was cooking something that smelled like heaven. What is that? Clara asked, sitting up. Rabbit stew. With real vegetables from the cold room and some spices I've been saving. Figured we earned it. Clara came to the table. The stew was rich and thick, better than anything Elias had made before. She ate 2 bowls, then a third. Hungry? Elias asked, almost smiling. Starving. Apparently burying people works up an appetite. Apparently. They ate in comfortable silence. The tension from the past few days had loosened some, not gone, but manageable. Clara felt like she could breathe again. What now? She asked when they were done. Elias leaned back in his chair. Now we wait. See if they come back, see if they don't, and we plan for both. You think we can hold them off again? If we have to, but I'm hoping it doesn't come to that. Why not? Because next time they'll bring more men. And more men means worse odds. Eventually, the math stops working in our favor. Clara understood. They'd won this round, but it was a temporary victory. Sooner or later, Blackridge would send enough people that numbers would matter more than terrain or skill. So we run, Clara said. Maybe. Or maybe we make them think it's not worth coming after us. How? Elias was quiet for a moment. Then, I've been thinking about that. About what would make Drummond stop. And the answer is simple. It has to cost him more than he gains. He's already lost 3 men. 3 men he can replace. What he can't replace is reputation. If word gets out that he sent people to kill a woman over pig feed and they failed, that makes him look weak. Weak is dangerous for someone like Drummond. People start questioning, start wondering if maybe they don't have to do what he says. Clara saw where this was going. You want to spread the story. I want the truth to reach people who might care. There's a trading post west of here. I mentioned it before. People from all over come through there. If the story spreads, if enough people hear about what Blackridge did, Drummond loses more than men. He loses power. That's a long shot. It's the shot we've got, unless you want to spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. Clara thought about it. About walking into a trading post full of strangers and telling them what had happened. About trusting that people would care. That justice was something that still existed outside of towns like Blackridge. It felt impossible. But then again, so had surviving the past 3 weeks. When do we leave? Clara asked. Another week, maybe 2. Let your back finish healing. Let me lay in enough supplies. And let winter start breaking for real. Right now, the trail west is suicide. Give it a little more time, and it becomes possible. And if they come back before then we fight, and we hope we're lucky twice. Clara nodded. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was something, and something was better than nothing. They spent the next week preparing. Elias showed Clara how to smoke meat, how to pack supplies for a long trek, how to read weather signs in the sky. She got better with the rifle, better with the axe, better at moving through snow without leaving obvious tracks. Slowly, she started to feel less like a victim and more like a person with choices. It was a small shift, subtle, but it changed everything. On the 8th day, Clara woke to the sound of water dripping. She lay there for a moment, confused. Then she realized the icicles outside were melting. Spring was coming. Elias heard it too. He looked at her from across the cabin and smiled. Really smiled, full and genuine. Pack your things, he said. We leave tomorrow. That night, they sat by the fire and didn't talk about plans or violence or what came next. They just sat. 2 people who'd survived something hard and come out different on the other side. Clara looked at Elias, at this man who'd saved her twice now, who'd killed for her, who'd shown her that survival could look like something other than slow surrender. Thank you, she said. For what? For everything, for cutting me loose, for bringing me here, for not giving up on me. Elias looked at her for a long moment. You know what you did that first day that made me help you? What? When Drummond hit you the 7th time, you didn't scream. Everyone expected you to, but you didn't. You just took it. That's when I knew. Knew what? That you'd survive, that you were stronger than they'd ever be. I just helped you figure that out. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. I'm still scared. Good. That means you're paying attention. They sat until the fire burned down to embers. Then they slept. Clara in the bed, Elias by the door, both of them ready for whatever came next. Tomorrow they'd leave. Tomorrow they'd head west. Tomorrow they'd take their chances with strangers and hope that somewhere out there justice still meant something. But tonight they were safe. Tonight they were together. And tonight that was enough. Ping in the store. We could stay here, build something. Or we go back. To the cabin. To the mountains. To being alone again. Clara thought about the cabin, about the silence and the cold and the way time moved different up there. Part of her missed it, but part of her never wanted to go back. I don't know if I'm a mountain person, Clara said. You're not, but you could be. Could be isn't the same as wanting to be. Elias smiled. No, it's not. They stood there together, watching the square, not needing to decide right now. The story had spread. Drummond's power was cracking, and Clara was alive, safe, surrounded by people who'd chosen to believe her. That night, Ruth brought news. A territorial marshal had started asking questions about Blackridge, about complaints against Drummond, about 3 men who'd gone into the mountains and only 2 had come back. It wasn't justice, not yet, but it was pressure. And pressure created cracks. "How long until something breaks?" Clara asked. "Hard to say," Ruth said. "Could be months, could be years, but it's breaking. You can feel it." Clara could. She could feel the story moving, spreading, changing the way people thought about power and who deserved it. It wasn't fast, it wasn't dramatic, but it was real. A month after arriving at Cedar Ridge, Clara was working in Ruth's store when a young woman came in. She was maybe 19, thin and scared-looking, with bruises on her arms she tried to hide. "Can I help you?" Clara asked. The woman hesitated, then, "Are you Clara Voss?" "I am. I'm from Whitman Creek, about 40 miles south. I heard what you did, how you got out." Clara set down the supplies she'd been organizing. "What's your name?" "Sarah." "Sarah, why are you here?" "Because I need to get out too, and I don't know how." Clara looked at this girl, at the fear in her eyes, at the way she held herself like she was expecting to be hit, and saw herself 6 weeks ago. Saw every person who'd ever been trapped by circumstance and cruelty and the indifference of people who should have cared. "Come with me," Clara said. She brought Sarah to Ruth, explained the situation. Ruth listened, nodded, and within an hour had arranged for Sarah to stay, to work, to have a chance. It wasn't perfect. It didn't erase what had happened to her, but it was something. After Sarah left to settle into her room, Ruth looked at Clara. "You're good at this." "At what?" "Helping. Seeing people who need it and doing something about it." Clara hadn't thought about it that way. She'd just seen someone who reminded her of herself and done what she wished someone had done for her sooner. "Maybe," Clara said. Over the next few months, more people came. Not many, a handful, scattered and desperate, but they came. They'd heard the story, heard about Cedar Ridge, heard that there was a place where being broken wasn't the end. Clara helped them all. She found them work, found them rooms, taught them what Elias had taught her. That survival was a skill you could learn, that strength wasn't about never falling, it was about getting back up. Elias stayed too. He guided hunters, taught tracking, and spent his evenings with Clara on the porch of Ruth's, watching the sun set over the mountains. They didn't talk much, didn't need to. They'd survived something together, and that created a bond that didn't require words. 6 months after leaving the cabin, Clara received a letter. It was from Blackridge, from Martha Henning, the woman who'd called her a thief in the square. The letter was short. "Clara, I don't know if you'll read this. Don't know if you should. But I'm writing anyway because someone needs to say it. We were wrong. What we did to you was wrong. Drummond's gone now. Territorial marshal came and took him away. Turns out he'd been skimming from the mine payroll for years. The town's different without him. Not perfect, but better. I'm sorry we didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry we didn't see you." Martha Clara read it twice. Then she folded it carefully and put it in her pocket. "Good news?" Elias asked. They were sitting on the porch, drinking coffee, watching the square. "Complicated news. Drummond's gone. Arrested." "How do you feel about that?" Clara thought about it, about the chair, about the pain, about the fear that had lived in her chest for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to be without it. "I feel like maybe it's finally over," she said. "Is it?" "I don't know, but I'm going to live like it is." Elias nodded. They sat in silence, and Clara realized she didn't need Blackridge to fall apart completely, didn't need revenge or vindication or anything beyond this. Sitting on a porch with someone who'd saved her, drinking coffee, watching a world that was messy and hard, but also full of people trying to do better. A year after leaving the cabin, Clara and Elias went back. They didn't plan to stay, just wanted to see it, to close that chapter properly. The trail was easier in summer, the mountains green and alive. When they reached the clearing, the cabin was still standing, weathered, empty, but solid. They went inside. Everything was how they'd left it. Supplies on shelves, furs on walls, the bed in the corner. It looked smaller than Clara remembered, less like salvation, more like a way station. You think about coming back? Clara asked. Sometimes. But I don't think I'm that person anymore. The one who needs to be alone. What person are you now? Elias looked at her. The one who's figuring out how to live with people again. How to be part of something bigger than just survival. Clara understood. She felt the same way, like she'd outgrown the version of herself that had needed to hide in the mountains. That version had served its purpose. Now she needed something different. They left the cabin at sunset, walking back toward Cedar Ridge together. The mountains rose around them, indifferent and massive, and Clara felt small in the best way, like she was exactly the right size for the space she was standing in. 2 years after leaving Blackridge, Clara stood on the porch of a house she'd helped build. It was small, rough around the edges, but it was hers. Elias had helped with the framing. Ruth had supplied materials. Sarah and 3 other women who'd found their way to Cedar Ridge had helped with the rest. It wasn't much, but it was home. Clara looked out at the mountains and thought about how far she'd come. From that chair in Blackridge to this porch in Cedar Ridge. From victim to survivor to something else. Something that didn't have a name but felt like solid ground under her feet. Elias came out and stood beside her. He'd built his own place about a mile away, close enough to visit, far enough for space. They saw each other most days. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just existed in the same space, comfortable with the silence. "You doing okay?" Elias asked. They left at dawn when the world was still caught between winter and something warmer. Clara carried a pack Elias had assembled for her: dried meat, flour, fire-starting kit, extra socks, a knife. It wasn't heavy, but it felt like the weight of everything they were leaving behind. The cabin sat empty at their backs, door barred from the outside, shutters closed. It looked abandoned, like nobody had ever lived there at all. "You think we'll come back?" Clara asked. Elias adjusted his own pack, heavier than hers, rifle slung across his shoulders. "Don't know. Maybe. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got." They walked west, following a trail only Elias could see. The snow was melting in patches, revealing brown earth and last year's dead grass. Water ran in thin streams down the mountainside, gathering in pools that would be creeks by summer. The air smelled different, less sharp, more alive. Spring was fighting winter for territory, and spring was starting to win. Clara's back still ached, but it was manageable. The welts had scabbed over, the bruising faded to yellow-green. She could move without pain shooting down her spine, could carry weight without feeling like she'd collapse. Progress. Slow, but real. They walked for hours without talking. Elias set a steady pace, not fast, but relentless. Clara matched him step for step, her legs remembering how to cover distance, her lungs adjusting to the thin mountain air. By midday, they'd put maybe 8 miles between themselves and the cabin. "We'll stop here," Elias said, pointing to a cluster of rocks that provided some shelter from the wind. They ate cold rations, dried meat and hard biscuits that tasted like sawdust. Clara washed it down with water from her canteen, grateful for anything that wasn't melted snow. "How far to the trading post?" she asked. 30 miles, maybe 35, depending on how much we have to detour." "How long will that take?" 3 days if the weather holds. 4 if it doesn't. 5 if we run into trouble." "What kind of trouble?" Elias looked at her. "The kind that lives in mountains. Bears coming out of hibernation. Cats. Men who make Drummond look friendly. Take your pick. Comforting. Honest." They rested for maybe 20 minutes, then kept moving. The trail got rougher as they descended. Loose rocks, hidden ice, sections where the path had washed out and they had to scramble across bare cliff face. Clara slipped twice. Both times Elias caught her before she fell. "Thanks," Clara said after the second time. "That's what the rope's for. If you fall, I don't want you taking me with you." "You said that before." "It's still true." The afternoon sun started to warm things up properly. Clara could feel sweat gathering under her pack, her shirt sticking to her back where the welts were still tender. She didn't complain. Complaining required energy she needed for walking. Around mid-afternoon, they came across a creek running fast with snowmelt. Elias stopped to refill their canteens, testing the current with a stick before kneeling at the edge. "This is good water," he said. "Straight from the high country. Won't find cleaner." Clara knelt beside him and drank directly from the creek. It was so cold it made her teeth ache, but it tasted clean and pure. Nothing like the water in Blackridge that always carried a faint mineral tang from the mines. "How do you know where we're going?" Clara asked, wiping her mouth. "There's no markers, no signs, just trees and rocks." "I've walked this route before. 3, maybe 4 times over the years. You start to remember things. That boulder shaped like a tooth. That pine with the split trunk. The way the ground slopes. It's like reading." "Reading what?" "The mountain. Everything tells you something if you pay attention." Clara looked around with new eyes. What had seemed like endless wilderness started to take shape. Patterns in how the trees grew, variations in the rock formations, the way water flowed. It wasn't random. It was a language she was just beginning to learn. They kept walking. By the time they made camp that night, Claire's legs were screaming and her shoulders ached from the pack. Elias chose a spot in a small depression surrounded by pines, sheltered, hidden, defensible. He built a fire small enough that it wouldn't be seen from a distance, and they ate hot food for the first time since leaving. The stew was simple: dried rabbit, some wild onions Elias had spotted and dug up, water. But it was warm and filling, and Clara felt her body start to relax for the first time all day. "How you holding up?" Elias asked. "Tired, sore, but okay." "Good. Tomorrow's longer. We need to make up time." Clara nodded and stared into the fire. The flames danced yellow and orange, throwing shadows that made the trees look like they were moving. She thought about the cabin, about Aaron's grave, about Samuel and Eddie limping back to Blackridge with their story. Wondered what Drummond had done when they arrived. Wondered if he was planning his next move or if he'd finally decided Clara wasn't worth the cost. "You're thinking too loud," Elias said. "Am I?" "You've got that look, like you're trying to solve a problem that doesn't have a solution." "Maybe that's because most problems don't." "Fair point." Elias added another small branch to the fire. "But sitting here worrying about what Drummond might do isn't going to change anything. All we can do is keep moving and deal with whatever comes." "That's a terrible philosophy." "It's kept me alive this long." Clara almost smiled. "You know what's funny? A month ago, I thought the worst thing that could happen to me already had. I was starving, alone, waiting to die. And now I've shot a man, buried another, and I'm walking across mountains with someone I barely know." "You know me well enough." "Do I? I don't even know why you really live up here. You said you didn't fit anywhere, but that's not the whole story." Elias was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the distance, something howled. Wolf or coyote. Clara couldn't tell. "I killed someone," Elias said finally. "Back in that town I told you about. The one where I watched them beat that woman. After she died, something in me broke. I went looking for the man who'd done it, the one who'd swung the strap, found him in a bar. Drunk, loud, still bragging about it." Clara waited. "I didn't plan to kill him, just wanted him to hurt the way she'd hurt. But things escalated, and I hit him harder than I meant to, and he went down and didn't get back up. Nobody saw it happen. I left town that night, kept moving, and eventually ended up here. That was 8 years ago." "Does anyone know?" "Just you?" Clara looked at him across the fire. His face was half shadow, expression unreadable. He looked tired, old, like he'd been carrying something heavy for too long and had finally set it down. "I don't think less of you," Clara said. "I didn't tell you so you'd think less of me. I told you so you'd understand everyone's got a past. Everyone's running from something. The question is what you do with the distance. And what are you doing with it? Trying to be better than I was. Trying to make different choices." He looked at her. "You saved my life back at the cabin. That means something. Means maybe I'm not just running anymore. Maybe I'm building something worth staying for." Clara felt something shift in her chest. Not love. It was too soon for that, too complicated. But something close. Recognition, maybe. The understanding that they were both broken in ways that fit together. "I'm glad you helped me," Clara said quietly. "Me too." They sat in silence until the fire burned low. Then they banked it and rolled out their bedrolls. Elias insisted Clara take the spot closer to the fire, where it would stay warmer through the night. She was too tired to argue. Clara fell asleep to the sound of wind in the pines and Elias's steady breathing beside her. Her dreams were fragmented, flashes of Blackridge, of the chair, of Samuel's face when the bullet hit him. But underneath the nightmares was something else. a sense that she was moving towards something instead of just running away. She woke once in the middle of the night to find Elias sitting up, rifle across his lap, staring into the darkness. He looked like he hadn't slept at all. "Everything okay?" Clara whispered. "Fine. Thought I heard something, probably just an animal. You should rest." "I will. Go back to sleep." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he couldn't protect them both if he was exhausted. But she was too tired to push, and sleep dragged her back under before she could form the words. The second day was harder. They climbed for most of the morning, switchbacking up a ridge that seemed to go on forever. Clara's legs burned, her lungs screamed, sweat soaked through her shirt despite the cold air. But she kept moving, one foot in front of the other, because stopping meant admitting she couldn't do this. Elias moved ahead of her, patient but unyielding. Every time Clara thought she couldn't take another step, she'd look up and see him still going, and somehow that was enough to keep her moving. "How much farther?" Clara gasped out around mid-morning. "To the top? Another hour, maybe less." "I don't have another hour." "Yes, you do. You've got whatever you need because the alternative is dying on this mountain, and you're too stubborn for that." "That's not encouragement. It's not supposed to be. It's fact." Clara wanted to hate him for it. Instead, she saved her breath for climbing. At the top, they paused. Below them, the valley spread out green and white, patches of snow mixed with new grass, creeks running silver through the landscape. And maybe 10 miles west, Clara could see buildings, small from this distance but unmistakable. "That's it," Elias said. "Cedar Ridge Trading Post. We'll be there by tomorrow afternoon if we keep this pace." Clara stared at the buildings. Civilization. People. The possibility of safety that didn't involve hiding in the mountains. It felt surreal, like she'd forgotten places like that existed. "What's it like?" she asked. "Rough, but fair. Most people who come through are trappers, traders, folks who don't ask too many questions. The owner's a woman named Ruth. She's hard but honest. If we tell her what happened, she'll listen." "And then what?" "Then it's up to her. She's got connections, people who move between settlements, who carry news. If she decides Black Ridge needs to answer for what they did, word will spread. And if word spreads, Drummond loses the one thing that keeps him in power. Control. Control." They started down. The descent was easier on Clara's lungs, but harder on her knees. The trail zigzagged through loose scree that shifted underfoot, and twice Clara nearly lost her balance on the sliding rock. Elias stayed close, one hand ready to grab her pack if she started to fall. By the time they reached the valley floor, the sun was dropping toward the horizon, and Clara was ready to collapse. Every muscle ached. Her feet were blistered inside her boots. She was pretty sure her shoulders were bleeding where the pack straps had rubbed through her shirt. They camped in a grove of aspens, their white bark glowing in the fading light. Elias built another small fire and made soup from the last of their dried vegetables. It tasted like almost nothing, but it was hot, and Clara drank it gratefully. "One more day," Elias said. "You can make it." "I know." "You've been strong. Stronger than I expected." Clara looked at him. "What did you expect?" "Honestly, I thought you'd slow me down. Thought I'd end up carrying you half the time, or you'd give up and want to go back. But you haven't. You just keep pushing." "Didn't have a choice." "Everyone has a choice. You just made the right ones." Clara wanted to believe him. Wanted to think that strength was something she'd found instead of something desperation had forced on her. But the line between those two things was thin, and she wasn't sure which side she was on. "Tell me about Ruth," Clara said, changing the subject. "How do you know her?" Elias poked at the fire with a stick. "Met her maybe 6 years ago. I'd come down from the mountains half-starved because I'd miscalculated my supplies. Walked into Cedar Ridge looking like death. And Ruth took one look at me and fed me without asking for payment. Said I could work it off later when I was stronger." "Did you?" "Spent 2 weeks helping her build an addition onto her store. She's got a good eye for people. Can tell the difference between someone down on their luck and someone looking to cause trouble. She'll see that in you." "How do you know?" "Because I see it, and if I can see it, she will too." That night, Clara dreamed about Black Ridge again. But this time it was different. Instead of the beating, she dreamed about walking away. About turning her back on the town, on Drummond, on all of it, and just walking. In the dream, She walked for days, weeks, years, until Blackridge was so far behind her it didn't exist anymore. Until she was just a person walking through mountains, and nothing that had happened there could touch her. She woke feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Elias was already up, packing their gear. "We should move soon. Want to get there before dark." "I'm ready." They ate a cold breakfast, the last of the dried meat and some wild berries Elias had found, and started walking. The trail was easier here, following the valley floor through meadows that were just starting to turn green. Clara could smell earth and growing things, could hear birds that weren't the harsh mountain crows, but something softer, more melodic. "Spring's really here," she said. "Few more weeks and everything will be green. Another month and the high country will be passable again. That's when the real trading season starts. People coming out of winter, desperate for supplies and company." "Do you miss it? The trading post, I mean, being around people?" Elias thought about it. "Sometimes, but mostly I miss the coffee." Clara laughed. It surprised her, the sound, the feeling of it. She hadn't laughed in so long she'd almost forgotten how. By mid-morning, they could see individual buildings. The trading post was bigger than Clara expected, maybe 15 structures clustered around a central square with corrals for horses and what looked like a warehouse. Smoke rose from several chimneys. People moved between buildings, small and distant but unmistakably alive. Clara felt her stomach tighten. She'd been alone with Elias for so long that the thought of being around strangers made her nervous. What if they looked at her and saw what Blackridge had seen? What if they decided she was the problem, not Drummond? "Hey," Elias said, noticing her hesitation. "You're okay. These aren't the people from your town. They don't know you. They don't have any reason to judge you." "Everyone has reasons. Then we give them different ones. We tell them the truth, and we let them decide." Clara nodded, but her hands were shaking. She shoved them in her pockets and kept walking. They entered Cedar Ridge around noon. People stared, two strangers appearing out of the mountains, both looking rough and trail-worn, but nobody stopped them. An old man nodded at Elias. A woman with a basket full of vegetables paused to watch them pass. Children playing in the square stopped their game to gawk. Elias led Clara to the largest building, a two-story structure with a sign that read Ruth's. Inside was warm and smelled like wood smoke and coffee. The main room held tables and chairs, a long bar, shelves stocked with supplies. A few people sat scattered around, eating or talking quietly. And behind the bar stood a woman who had to be Ruth. She was maybe 50, built solid, with gray-streaked hair pulled back and eyes that looked like they'd seen everything twice and hadn't been impressed either time. When Elias and Clara approached, she set down the glass she'd been wiping and studied them. "Elias Crow," she said. Her voice was low, rough, from years of smoking or shouting or both. "Didn't expect to see you until spring proper." "Ruth? And who's this?" "Clara Voss. She needs help." Ruth's gaze shifted to Clara, taking in the borrowed clothes, the thin frame, the way Clara held herself like she was ready to run or fight. "What kind of help?" "The kind that involves telling a story people need to hear," Elias said. Ruth gestured to a table in the corner, away from the other patrons. "Sit. I'll bring coffee. Then you talk." They sat. Ruth brought 3 cups of coffee, real coffee, not the weak substitute Clara had drunk in Blackridge, and settled across from them. Up close, Clara could see scars on Ruth's hands, burn marks and cuts that spoke to years of hard work. "Talk," Ruth said. So Clara did. She told Ruth about her father's debts, about starving in Blackridge, about stealing pig feed because dying fast seemed better than dying slow. She told her about Drummond and the beating, about Elias cutting her loose, about the cabin and the men who'd come hunting. She told her about shooting Samuel, about burying Aaron, about walking 35 miles because staying meant dying. Her voice shook through parts of it. She had to stop twice to drink coffee and steady herself. But she got through it. Got through the whole story without breaking down, without running, without turning back into the terrified woman tied to that chair. Ruth listened without interrupting. When Clara finished, the older woman sat back and drank her coffee, her expression unreadable. "That's a hell of a story," Ruth said finally. "It's the truth." "I believe you. Question is, what do you want me to do about it?" "Spread it," Elias said. "Let people know what Blackridge is doing. Let them know Drummond's running that town like his personal kingdom, and anyone who crosses him ends up dead or disappeared. Ruth tapped her fingers on the table. You know what you're asking. You spread a story like that. You make enemies. Drummond's got connections. Other towns, other sheriffs who think the same way he does. They hear I'm talking against one of their own, they might decide Cedar Ridge needs to learn a lesson. Or, Elias said, they might decide Drummond's a liability, that his methods are bad for business, that letting him continue makes them all look bad. That's optimistic. Maybe, but it's also possible. Ruth looked at Clara. What about you? You want this fight? Because once this story starts moving, it doesn't stop. People will ask questions, Drummond will hear about it, and he'll come looking for you. Clara thought about it, about staying quiet, about disappearing into the territories, about spending the rest of her life looking over her shoulder. Then she thought about that chair in Blackridge, about the faces jeering, about how easy it had been for them to hurt her because nobody was watching. I want people to know, Clara said. I want them to know what happened, what he did, and I want him to answer for it. Ruth smiled. It wasn't warm, but it was real. All right then, I'll spread your story. But you two need to stay here for a while. Let me send word first, see how it lands. If it goes south, you'll need to run fast. That clear? Clear, Elias said. Ruth stood up. There's a room upstairs. It's yours for as long as you need it. I'll bring food. You both look like you haven't eaten properly in weeks. She wasn't wrong. Ruth brought them soup and bread and vegetables and meat, more food than Clara had seen in months. Clara ate until her stomach hurt, then ate a little more because she couldn't help herself. The bread was fresh, still warm from the oven. The soup had actual chunks of beef floating in it. She wanted to cry from how good it tasted. Afterward, they went upstairs to a small room with 2 beds and a window that overlooked the square. It was simple, just the beds, a small table, a wash basin, but it felt like luxury after weeks in the cabin. Clara sat on one of the beds and felt herself start to shake. Not from cold, from release. They'd made it. They were safe. For now. Elias sat on the other bed. You okay? I don't know. Ask me tomorrow. Fair enough. Clara looked at him. Thank you. For getting me here. For not giving up when I slowed you down. You didn't slow me down. I did. But you were patient anyway. Elias looked uncomfortable with the gratitude. Get some rest. Real rest. You've earned it. That night, Clara slept in a real bed for the first time in weeks. She dreamed, but the dreams were softer, less blood, less screaming. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the window and Elias was already up, looking out at the square. What are you thinking? Clara asked. That this might actually work. That maybe we're not as alone as I thought. Over the next few days, Ruth was good to her word. She sent riders out, men and women who made their living carrying messages and goods between settlements. They carried Clara's story to other trading posts, to mining camps, to settlements scattered across the territory. And slowly, word came back. Some places didn't care. Some sheriffs sent messages back saying Drummond had every right to maintain order however he saw fit. But other places, more places than Clara expected, sent messages of support, of outrage, of solidarity with a woman who'd been beaten for the crime of starving. Ruth showed Clara and Elias the letters as they came in. One from a mining camp 30 miles south, signed by 17 workers. Another from a small farming community, written by a woman who said she'd been in a similar situation and understood. A third from a traveling preacher who said he'd make sure to tell Clara's story in every town he visited. People care more than you think, Ruth said one evening over dinner. They just need someone to tell them it's okay to care, that standing up doesn't make them troublemakers. Does it work? Clara asked. People caring? Sometimes. Not always, but sometimes is better than never. A week after arriving at Cedar Ridge, Clara was helping Ruth in the store when a territorial marshal rode in. He was a big man, 50-something, with a badge pinned to his chest and eyes that didn't miss much. He tied his horse outside Ruth's and came in looking tired. Ruth, he said by way of greeting. Marshal Brennan, what brings you out here? Complaints. Been hearing stories about a town called Blackridge, about a sheriff named Drummond who's running things rough. Figured I'd stop here first, see what you know. Ruth looked at Clara. This is Clara Voss. She's got a story you should hear. so Clara told it again. This time was easier than the first. She'd told it enough times now that the words came smoother, less raw. But Brennan listened with the same intensity Ruth had, his expression growing darker as Clara described the beating, the hunt, the shooting. When she finished, Brennan sat back and rubbed his face. "You're saying Sheriff Drummond ordered men to track you into the mountains and kill you?" "Yes." "And one of those men died in the process?" "Yes." "But we buried him. Elias can show you where." Brennan looked at Elias, who'd been standing quietly near the door. "You Crow?" "I am." "Les, you kill that man?" "I did. Self-defense. He was shooting at me." Brennan nodded slowly. "I'll need to investigate, but if what you're saying is true, Drummond's looking at serious charges. Abuse of power, attempted murder, probably more once I start digging." "When will you go to Blackridge?" Clara asked. "Soon. Need to gather more testimony first, talk to people who've passed through there, build a case solid enough that Drummond can't weasel out of it." He looked at Clara. "You willing to testify if it comes to that?" Clara's stomach clenched. The thought of going back to Blackridge, of standing in front of Drummond and everyone who'd watched her suffer, it made her want to vomit. But she nodded. "If I have to." "Good. I'll be in touch." Brennan left. Ruth poured Clara a drink, whiskey, harsh and burning, and Clara drank it in one swallow. "That was brave," Ruth said. "That was terrifying." "Same thing, most of the time." Over the next 3 weeks, Marshal Brennan returned twice more, each time with more questions, more details to verify. He interviewed Elias separately, then together with Clara. He rode out to the cabin, saw Aaron's grave, examined the bullet holes in the walls. He was thorough. And then one day he came back with news. "I went to Blackridge," Brennan said. He looked tired, like the trip had aged him. "Talked to people. Most wouldn't say anything, too scared of Drummond. But a few did, enough to corroborate your story, and when I started looking into Drummond's finances, things got interesting." "What did you find?" Elias asked. "He's been skimming from the mine payroll for years, taking a cut of every worker's pay, pocketing the difference. I'm talking thousands of dollars. And when workers complained, he'd run them out of town or worse." Clara felt something cold settle in her chest. "How many people did he hurt?" "Hard to say. But you weren't the first. And you wouldn't have been the last." "What happens now?" Clara asked. "Now I arrest him. Bring him to the territorial capital for trial. He'll face charges for theft, corruption, abuse of power, and attempted murder. If convicted, he's looking at 20 years minimum." 20 years. Clara tried to imagine Drummond in prison for 20 years. Tried to feel satisfaction or justice or something. Mostly she just felt tired. "When are you arresting him?" Elias asked. "Tomorrow. I've got 2 deputies meeting me in Blackridge at noon. We'll take him then." "Can we be there?" Clara asked. The words surprised her even as she said them. Brennan looked at her. "You sure you want that?" "No, but I think I need it." He nodded. "All right. You can come. But you stay back. Let us handle it. This could get ugly." The next morning, Clara, Elias, and Marshal Brennan rode toward Blackridge. Clara borrowed a horse from Ruth, a gentle mare who didn't seem to mind that Clara hadn't ridden in years. The journey took most of the day. As they got closer, Clara felt her anxiety building. The mountains looked the same, the trail looked the same. Even the air smelled the same, pine and rock and cold. Like the past 6 weeks had been a dream, and she was waking back into her nightmare. "You okay?" Elias asked quietly. He was riding beside her, close enough to grab her reins if she panicked. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." They reached Blackridge just before noon. The town looked smaller than Clara remembered, grayer, less important. Marshal Brennan's 2 deputies were waiting at the edge of town, young men, both armed, both looking nervous. "Ready?" Brennan asked. "Ready," one of them said. They rode into town together. People stopped what they were doing to stare. Clara recognized faces. Martha Henning outside the general store. Samuel Cross limping near the stables. Eddie Marsh on crutches. They all looked at her like they were seeing a ghost. Maybe they were. Marshal Brennan rode straight to the sheriff's office. Drummond was inside, feet up on his desk, looking smug right up until Brennan walked in with his badge showing. "Sheriff Drummond," Brennan said, "I'm here to place you under arrest for theft, corruption, abuse of power, and attempted murder. Drummond's face went from smug to shocked to furious in about 3 seconds. The hell you are. I'm the law here. Not anymore. Stand up. Hands behind your back. Clara watched from the doorway as Drummond realized he was cornered. He looked at his gun hanging on the wall, then at the 3 armed men in his office. The math wasn't in his favor. This is because of her, isn't it? Drummond pointed at Clara. That lying thief. Stand up, Brennan repeated, or I'll drag you out. Drummond stood. The deputies cuffed him, and as they led him outside, he looked at Clara with pure hatred. This isn't over, he said. Yeah, Clara said quietly. It is. They took Drummond away. The town watched in silence. Nobody cheered, nobody protested. They just watched their sheriff get arrested and didn't do anything about it. After Drummond was gone, Martha Henning approached Clara. She looked older than she had 6 weeks ago, smaller. Clara, she said, I need to say something. Clara waited. We were wrong. What we did to you was wrong. Drummond told us you were a thief, a troublemaker, and we believed him because it was easier than questioning. But you didn't deserve what happened, and I'm sorry. Clara looked at this woman who'd called her names, who'd thrown stones, who'd stood by while Drummond beat her. Part of Clara wanted to spit in her face, but mostly she just felt empty. Okay, Clara said. That's it? Just okay? What do you want me to say? That I forgive you? That it's fine? It's not fine. It's never going to be fine. But you apologized, and I heard it, and now I'm leaving. Martha nodded, tears in her eyes. Where will you go? Somewhere else. Somewhere better. Clara turned and walked back to her horse. Elias was waiting, and together they rode out of Black Ridge one more time. Behind them, the town got smaller and smaller until it disappeared completely. How do you feel? Elias asked when they were miles away. Clara thought about it. Free, scared, angry, sad, everything all at once. That sounds about right. They rode back to Cedar Ridge in silence. When they arrived, Ruth had dinner waiting, real food, warm and plentiful. Clara ate and told Ruth what had happened, and Ruth nodded like it was exactly what she'd expected. Justice moves slow, Ruth said, but it moves. Now the question is what you do next. Clara had been thinking about that, about what came after justice, after revenge, after survival. She'd spent so long just trying not to die that she'd forgotten to think about how to live. I want to stay, Clara said. Here, in Cedar Ridge. If you'll have me. Ruth smiled. I'll have you, and I could use the help. Store needs someone who knows how to talk to people, how to make them feel welcome. I don't know if I'm good at that. You will be. You've got a story people respond to. Use it. So Clara stayed. She worked in Ruth's store, learning inventory and bookkeeping and how to negotiate with traders who thought they could cheat her. She wasn't good at it at first. She was too defensive, too quick to assume the worst. But slowly she learned, and people came. Not many at first. But gradually, word spread that Cedar Ridge was a place where broken people could find help. A woman fleeing a violent husband. A man who'd been run out of his town for speaking against corruption. A teenage girl whose family had sold her to settle debts. Clara helped them all. She found them work, found them places to stay, taught them what Elias had taught her. That survival was a skill you could learn. That strength wasn't about never falling, it was about getting back up. Elias stayed too. He guided hunters, taught tracking, helped Ruth build a new storage shed. But mostly he stayed because Clara was there, and after everything they'd been through, leaving felt wrong. They didn't talk about what they were to each other, didn't put labels on it. They just existed in the same space, comfortable with the silence and the not knowing. 3 months after Drummond's arrest, Clara received a letter. It was from Martha Henning again. Clara, I don't know if you'll read this, don't know if you should, but I'm writing anyway because someone needs to say it. Black Ridge is different now. We have a new sheriff, a woman named Kate Morrison, who actually cares about justice. The mine workers formed a union and negotiated better pay. The town council voted to forgive old debts, including your father's. It's not perfect, but it's better. And it's because you spoke up, because you didn't let us get away with what we did. So thank you for being braver than we were. Martha Clara read the letter twice. Then she showed it to Elias. How does that make you feel? He asked. Like maybe it wasn't for nothing. Like maybe speaking up actually changed something. It did. You changed things for everyone who comes here looking for help. You changed things for me, gave me a reason to stop hiding. That's not nothing. Clara folded the letter carefully. I think I want to write back. Tell her I'm okay, that I'm building something new. You should. So Clara wrote back, and Martha wrote again. And slowly, tentatively, they began a correspondence that was awkward and painful, but also necessary. Clara would never forget what Blackridge had done, but she could acknowledge that people could change, that towns could change, that the past didn't have to define everything that came after. 6 months after leaving the cabin, Clara and Elias decided to go back. Not to stay, just to see it, to close that chapter properly. The trail was easier in summer, the mountains green and alive. Wildflowers bloomed in meadows that had been buried under snow. The creek they'd crossed frozen was now rushing and full of fish. Everything that had been dead was alive again. When they reached the clearing, the cabin was still standing, weathered, empty, but solid. They went inside. Everything was how they'd left it. Supplies on shelves, furs on walls, the bed in the corner. It looked smaller than Clara remembered. Less like salvation, more like a way station. You think about coming back? Clara asked. Sometimes. But I don't think I'm that person anymore. The one who needs to be alone. What person are you now? Elias looked at her. The one who's figuring out how to live with people again. How to be part of something bigger than just survival. Clara understood. She felt the same way, like she'd outgrown the version of herself that had needed to hide in the mountains. That version had served its purpose. Now she needed something different. They spent one night in the cabin, built a fire in the old fireplace, ate dinner at the table where Elias had first fed her, slept in the bed where she'd recovered from Drummond's beating. In the morning, they packed up a few things Clara wanted to keep, a fur she'd learned to work, the knife Elias had given her, a cup she'd used every day. Then they locked the door and walked away. Think anyone will find it? Clara asked. Maybe. Or maybe it'll just sit here until it falls apart. Either way, it did its job. They walked back toward Cedar Ridge together. The mountains rose around them, indifferent and massive, and Clara felt small in the best way, like she was exactly the right size for the space she was standing in. A year after leaving Blackridge, Clara stood on the porch of a house she'd helped build. It was small, rough around the edges, but it was hers. Elias had helped with the framing. Ruth had supplied materials. Sarah, the young woman who'd arrived from Whitman Creek, and 3 other women who'd found their way to Cedar Ridge had helped with the rest. It wasn't much. 1 room, a loft for sleeping, a wood stove for heat and cooking. But it had a door that locked from the inside and windows that let in light, and that was everything. Clara looked out at the mountains and thought about how far she'd come. From that chair in Blackridge to this porch in Cedar Ridge. From victim to survivor to something else. Something that didn't have a name but felt like solid ground under her feet. Elias came out and stood beside her. He'd built his own place about a mile away, close enough to visit, far enough for space. They saw each other most days. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they just existed in the same space, comfortable with the silence. You doing okay? Elias asked. Clara smiled. Yeah, I think I am. Good. They stood there watching the sun set, 2 people who'd survived the worst and found something better on the other side. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't smooth, but it was theirs. 2 years after leaving Blackridge, Claire received word that Drummond had been sentenced. 25 years for all charges combined. He'd die in prison, most likely. Old and forgotten. Clara didn't feel triumph when she heard, just a quiet sense of closure. Justice had happened, slowly, imperfectly, but it had happened, and that was enough. By then, Cedar Ridge had grown. More people arrived seeking refuge, seeking a second chance. Ruth expanded the trading post. A doctor moved to town. Someone opened a school. It was becoming a real community, messy and imperfect, but real. Clara had become part of that community. She ran the store now, Ruth having semi-retired. She organized supplies for new arrivals, taught them how to survive, helped them find work. She'd discovered she was good at it, at seeing what people needed and figuring out how to provide it. Elias had stopped guiding hunters. Instead, he taught survival skills to anyone who wanted to learn: tracking, trapping, fire building, shelter construction. He was patient with students in a way he'd never been patient with himself. They'd become the people others turned to when things got hard, when someone needed help, when someone didn't know where else to go. It was exhausting sometimes, but it was also meaningful in a way Clara had never experienced before. 3 years after leaving Blackridge, Clara and Elias were sitting on her porch when he said, "I've been thinking." "About what?" "About this. Us. What we're doing." Clara felt her stomach tighten. "Okay. We've been dancing around it for years now, living separately, pretending we're just friends who survived something together. But that's not what this is." "Then what is it?" Elias looked at her. "I don't know, but I think it's something worth naming, something worth building." Clara's throat tightened. "I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of losing this. Of us trying to be something more and it ruining what we already have." "Or," Elias said, "it could make it better, stronger. We've survived everything else together. Why not this?" Clara looked at him, at this man who'd saved her life, who'd taught her to be strong, who'd stayed even when leaving would have been easier. And she realized he was right. They'd already built something. They just hadn't acknowledged it yet. "Okay," Clara said. "Okay? Let's try. Let's be whatever this is and see where it goes." Elias smiled, really smiled, full and genuine. "Good, because I already started building an addition onto your house." "You what?" "Well, I figured if we're going to do this, I need more than one room for my stuff." Clara laughed. "You're impossible. And you're stuck with me." "I guess I am." They sat there as the sun set, holding hands for the first time in 3 years, and Clara felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe. Or just the understanding that she'd finally found a place where she belonged. 4 years after leaving Blackridge, Clara stood in the center of Cedar Ridge, surrounded by maybe 50 people. They'd gathered to celebrate the opening of a new building, a shelter specifically for people escaping bad situations. It had taken a year to build, funded by donations and labor from everyone who'd benefited from Clara's help. "I don't know what to say," Clara admitted, looking at the crowd. "When I came here 4 years ago, I was half dead and terrified. I didn't think I deserved to survive, let alone to be happy. But this place, all of you, showed me I was wrong. Showed me that community means helping each other through the worst. So thank you for saving me and for letting me help save others." People clapped. Some cried. Sarah hugged Clara so hard she couldn't breathe. Ruth handed her a bottle of whiskey and told her to make a toast. Clara raised the bottle. "To Cedar Ridge, to second chances, to surviving." "To surviving!" everyone echoed. They drank and celebrated into the night. Music played. Children ran around in the square. And Clara stood with Elias, watching it all, feeling like maybe, finally, she'd done something that mattered. 5 years after leaving Blackridge, Clara and Elias got married. It was a small ceremony, just Ruth, Sarah, a few close friends. No church, no formal vows. Just two people promising to keep choosing each other, keep building together, keep surviving whatever came next. They moved into the expanded house, combined their lives in ways that felt natural and right. Elias taught Clara more about the mountains. Clara taught Elias more about people. They balanced each other, his solitude with her community, her trauma with his patience, their shared brokenness with their shared strength. Life wasn't perfect. They fought sometimes. Clara still had nightmares about Blackridge. Elias still got restless and needed to disappear into the mountains for days at a time. But they worked through it. They talked. They compromised. They forgave. 7 years after leaving Blackridge, Clara traveled back one more time. She didn't tell anyone she was going, just saddled a horse one morning and rode south. Elias wanted to come with her, but she needed to do this alone. Blackridge looked different, better. The buildings were better maintained. The people looked less desperate. There was a new school, a new church, even a small library. Clara walked through the square where she'd been beaten. Someone had planted flowers there. She stood in that spot and tried to feel something: anger, sadness, fear. But mostly, she just felt nothing. It was done. Over. This place couldn't hurt her anymore. Martha Henning found her there. "Clara, I didn't know you were coming. I didn't plan it, just needed to see it." What do you think? I think it's better. I think maybe it's learning. Martha nodded. We are, slowly, but we are, because of you. It wasn't just me. It was everyone who spoke up after, who demanded better. But you started it. You survived and you spoke and you didn't let us forget what we'd done. That takes courage. Clara looked at this woman who'd once been her enemy, who'd called her a thief and thrown stones and stood by while she suffered, who was now trying, in her own imperfect way, to be better. I forgive you, Clara said. Not because you deserve it, but because I'm tired of carrying the anger, so I forgive you, and I hope you keep trying to be better. Martha's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Clara nodded and walked back to her horse. She rode out of Blackridge one final time, and this time she didn't look back. When she got home to Cedar Ridge, Elias was waiting on the porch. How was it? He asked. Necessary, but I don't need to go back again. Good, because I made dinner and it's getting cold. Clara laughed and went inside. They ate together, talked about their day, made plans for tomorrow. Simple things, normal things. The kind of things Clara had once thought she'd never have. 10 years after leaving Blackridge, Clara stood on her porch and watched the sun rise over the mountains. She was 32 now. Elias was almost 40. They'd built a life together that was messy and complicated and beautiful. Cedar Ridge had grown into a real town, maybe 200 people, with more arriving every year. The shelter Clara had opened was full most of the time. She'd trained others to help run it, to do the work she'd started. She still had nightmares sometimes, still flinched when someone raised their voice, still carried scars on her back that would never fully fade, but she'd learned to live with them, to see them not as weaknesses but as proof that she'd survived. Elias came out and wrapped his arms around her from behind. Morning. Morning. What are you thinking about? How far we've come. How much has changed. And I'm grateful for all of it, even the hard parts, because they led me here. Elias kissed her temple. Me too. They stood there watching the sun climb higher, two people who'd been broken and had put themselves back together, who'd survived the worst and found something worth living for, who'd learned that strength wasn't about never falling, it was about getting back up. And in the silence of the morning, with the mountains standing witness and a whole life stretched out ahead of them, Clara felt something she'd never thought she'd feel again. Hope. Not the desperate, clawing hope of someone drowning, but the quiet, steady hope of someone who'd found solid ground and knew how to stand on it. It was enough. It was everything. And it was finally, completely, hers.